The first 48 hours of a murder case are critical to its outcome, and in this case it was no different. Police had their suspect. Then, as the hours, weeks and months went by, it appeared the killer had created the perfect murder.
I got a phone call that a young female was found deceased in the vegetation off a parking area down at the Noosa Parkland. And the body was found some distance from the parking bays. The area was very heavily vegetated. There was acacia, wattle trees in the vicinity and other vegetation. She was obviously in a state where there had been violence done to her body. By that I mean there was marks around the throat and around the cheeks and eyes area.
The body was discovered by a group of holidaymakers at about 8:30 this morning, lying in bushes only a few hundred metres from the beachfront. Police say it's unlikely the body had been there longer than the early hours of this morning. It appeared she'd been bashed and strangled.
Here we have one of the top holiday destinations in Australia, if not possibly the world, and we have a crime of such violence, of such propensity to cause harm to another human being in what should be an idyllic environment and an idyllic lifestyle that goes with it. As far as what may have caused her to be at this location, you go through all the scenarios that are conceivable. Had she been down there? Was she attacked at the beach or the riverfront? Was she assaulted in the city area? Was her body dumped there?
Noosa being a big tourist destination, you wonder whether she's met foul play after meeting someone at a nightclub, whether she's gone out for a night on the town and met someone and something tragic's happened, and it's occurred pretty much close to where her body was found.
There was all sorts of perambulations that go through your mind as to how this has happened, and obviously you can't discount anything.
At that stage, it was a matter of gathering all of the scientific evidence that's present at the scene and cording the scene off so that this can be conducted by the scientific staff.
We bag the hands up and lock them down so that anything that falls off the fingers or off the nails is found in the bags at the morgue. There are a number of what we call tape that's collected that's from the clothing on the body to see whether or not there was any fibres or hairs there that may have been associated with an offender.
Your examination is minute. Tyres, footprints, anything at all. Remembering it's a sandy location and it's very difficult at times to get these sorts of impressions, but those things become very important in the examination of a crime scene.
A number of shoe impressions were found along the public track to where the body was found. But the prints were not the only possible link back to the killer. Soil and vegetation were also gathered in the hope that if they found their offender, it would place him or her at the scene.
Initially, the main focus is to identify the person or the body. There was no identification on her. There were a number of tattoos and a significant amount of earrings in her ears.
The tattooed name she had, Michael and Corey, obviously was a very, very important clue to the puzzle, as it were, as to who she was.
The descriptions of the deceased were given to the media and it was broadcast so members of the public might be able to recognise who the deceased was and try and identify her.
The investigation hit an early hurdle when police discovered the victim was carrying no identification. The woman is in her mid to late 20s with shoulder-length brown hair.
She's dressed in a red coloured pair of jeans, a dark coloured top, and she's got a number of tattoos.
The woman also had numerous earrings in both ears and a distinctive S-shaped silver ring. Anyone with information is asked to contact Crime Stoppers or Noosa Police.
As a result of that, people came forward from the Gympie area who had recognised those tattoos and piercings of a lady that they'd known.
Gympie was an hour's drive north of Noosa.
I was surprised it was Gympie area. I thought it would be more a local girl. I still thought that perhaps the nightclub scenario was possibly what had occurred. She'd been to a nightclub and possibly met with foul play after that. So travelling up to Gympie, it was put another angle on the investigation, was what's going to happen now? Who is this girl? And what are these people going to tell us?
When a call went out to the public to help in identifying the tattooed body of a woman found in Noosa, The police received an immediate response.
There were people in Gympie that thought that they knew the identity of the deceased female. They described the tattoos as they'd known them, and they were quite sure that the person that we found, or the body we found, was Samantha Bodsworth. Obviously, the formal identification hadn't been made.
They asked us to go with them to Brisbane to identify or see if it was our daughter. But I think from our description of her and the body that they had retrieved, I think that it was almost a formality. They virtually knew that our daughter was the one in the morgue. I did in my head, but not in my heart. And as soon as I saw it was Sam, I just had to hug her even though she wasn't there. Stupidly trying to warm her up even when you know a person's dead. And she got no makeup on. Not a scrap of makeup. She had a car accident several years before, and she was very self-conscious of her scar on her cheek. And that was so odd. There is no way on this planet she would have gone anywhere, even to the front door, without her makeup on.
So why had Samantha been found 1 hour's drive away in Noosa without her makeup? Police had believed that she may have gone there for a night out and that something had gone wrong with someone she met.
And she'd been murdered by a strange one-night stand or whatever you call them today. I don't know, but that wouldn't have been Samantha. She would not have done that. It wasn't her scene. She liked to be with the people she knew and she loved.
And that was her 2 children, Corey and Michael, who were with their paternal grandparents on the night Samantha went out and never came home. The house the 3 shared was now under forensic examination.
Upon entry to the house through an open garage door, there were a couple of spots of blood. Upon further examination throughout the house, there were some blood stains in the bedroom. There were some wiped up blood stains in the lounge room, dining room area. People often try and clean up crime scenes after they've occurred, and this had all of the characteristics of a fairly rudimentary cleanup.
Samples of blood and bloodied items were collected in hope that the killer might have been injured and left his DNA behind. Samantha's bedroom gave the impression that some sort of struggle had taken place.
We found a hairdryer that had little samples of blood on the cord. So obviously that suggested that perhaps it could have been used in the assault with Samantha, whether it be wrapped around her throat or whether it was used in some other way in the course of her being assaulted.
During the examination of the laundry area, there was a number of items of clothing in the washing machine. We pulled those out and the items of clothing were bloodstained, and amongst the bloodstained clothing was a pendant.
That was one of Sam's much-loved items because her uncle in Britain gave it to her. And you can't get that stone anywhere else but in that particular little part of Britain.
One of the most intriguing aspects of the pendant was that we'd had information from Sam's parent that she'd never removed it. Even when she was having a shower, going swimming, anything, that pendant stayed with her. It was obviously very important to her. And yet here it was, basically in a washing machine in a house where there'd been bloodstains and other signs of violence. So this sort of indicates to you that there's something not right. There's something amiss with this whole picture. Why was it that she didn't have a pendant? Who would have taken it off her? Where was the chain? These questions were the things that informed part of how we needed to really progress the inquiry.
While there seemed no forced entry into Samantha's house, a screen near the front door was off the window. And her car was not in a garage, where her parents had told police it was usually parked. Nor was it at the car park in Noosa, where her body was found.
We had the crime scene at Noosa, which was still very important to us as a crime scene. We had the potential of a crime scene at her house. And obviously the distance of some hour of travel from the house to Noosa was significant. The questions had to be asked. Did she go there when she was alive? Did she go there of her own free will? Was she in fact dead at that stage? And these scenarios were part of the whole gambit of what we had to look at and try and establish.
At the post-mortem, the pathologist was able to prove that the cause of death was strangulation, and this was consistent with what we saw at the scene, the number of marks that were there.
Scrapings were taken from underneath her fingernails. If Samantha had put up a struggle, then potentially the offender's DNA had been captured.
There was evidence that her clothes that she was in when she was found at Noosa weren't necessarily the clothes that she subsequently died in.
Samantha's injuries would suggest that blood spatter would have been found upon her clothes. There was none.
In other words, someone had changed her clothes, which showed a fairly callous and motivated desire not to be apprehended by police on someone's part.
We were of the impression that Samantha Bodsworth was killed in her home. It was a mystery how she went from Gympie to Hall Road at Noosa, but we were of no doubt that she was murdered in her home.
At the time the search of Samantha's house was being conducted, her ex-partner was helping police with their inquiries. Like her friends, Michael Bodsworth immediately contacted police on hearing a news report of a tattooed woman's body being found in Noosa.
I'll come down to see it's my ex.
Okay. All right.
As soon as I heard Michael and Corey, that's all I needed to hear.
All right. And you have two sons, do you?
Yes, I have two sons, and their names are Michael and Corey.
Michael Bodsworth was interviewed at the Gympie police station. He was there of his own free will, and he may have been able to help us with our inquiries. Now, whether help us meant he would be able to provide us with information, or whether help us meant he became a person of interest, was yet to be proven. At that stage, we had a very open book.
And how long have you known Samantha?
We've been together for 11 years.
Are you still together with Sam?
No.
What's the situation with the two of you?
You know, I got onto the drink and kept on arguing and fighting all the time. So she asked me to leave. So I moved to the pub.
Do you remember when that was?
It's about 3-4 months ago.
And when was the last time you saw Samantha?
Just after 5 on Friday.
Yesterday?
Yesterday.
Okay, and whereabouts did you see her at 5 p.m?
Mount Pleasant Hotel. I was standing in the doorway talking, saying that she'd dropped the boys off at Mum and Dad's. And I asked if I could have a shower at her place. She said, yeah, no problem, because the hot water system had blown up at the mount. I went upstairs, chucked all my clothes in the bag, then went back downstairs in my car, went up to see my kids at my parents' place.
In the lengthy interview, Michael Bodsworth detailed everything he did in the entire 24 hours from the time he saw Samantha.
At what time did you leave your mum and dad's place?
We went up at 6, then I went to Woolies,
Why'd you go there?
get smoked,
What sort of smokes you bought?
long bench.
Did you get a receipt at all from Woolworths?
Yeah.
Do you have that receipt with you?
No, it's at my room.
Do you know what time the purchase was made?
18:44 on there,
How are you able to say what the time was on the docket?
because they've got it written on the docket.
Did you look at the docket and see?
I always check the docket.
Do you always check the time on the docket?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only way we get the tell time. I don't wear a watch.
Oh, okay.
Then I rang Sam and told him the car wouldn't start.
What was wrong with your car?
The battery terminals are a bit dicky. So I rang Sam, she said she'll come and get me. And then she rang me back and she locked herself out the house.
At what stage was that?
She was coming to get me. She walked out to her car and she locked herself out the house because she didn't pick the keys up. I told her that she'll have to try and break in somehow.
He says that's the last he saw or spoke with Samantha, and that he waited for a small period of time before beginning to walk to her house.
What's happened? You got Sam's place.
There was carpool doors up. There was no car, no Sam, no nothing.
Any lights on inside the house?
No lights, no nothing.
He's then walked all the way back to his car at the car park, managed to get it started, and then simply driven back to the Mount Pleasant Hotel, where he's gone, had a shower, changed his clothes, and gone downstairs to have a drink at the bar.
Can you give us any explanation as to what she would be doing at Noosa Heads?
She wouldn't be.
Do you ever go down there together?
No.
Has she ever gone down there on her own?
Not as far as I know.
And were you at Noosa Heads last night?
No.
Did you travel south of Gympie at all last night?
No, I didn't go anywhere out of Gympie last night.
He's then consented for us to go to his unit, which was on top of the Mount Pleasant Hotel, to have a look at his room, to conduct scientific investigations and to seize the article of clothing that he said that he was wearing the night before. When we went to the Mount Pleasant Hotel, I was aware that there are a number of patrons at the bar drinking. I wouldn't call it a lynch mob mentality. There was certainly a lot of people in the bar that night that did know Samantha, that had perhaps formed an opinion by that stage of who they believe may have been responsible for it.
The person making most of the accusations was Scott Knowles.
That Saturday evening, because we just found out that we'd lost Sam, there was a lot of anger with a lot of people because she was so well loved. My anger was at boiling point because of my suspicions that Michael had done it.
Scott Knowles was Samantha's new boyfriend.
Sam and my relationship developed 2 months after it split up. We always got on well together and we just enjoyed one another's company.
Michael Bodsworth had mentioned this relationship in his interview.
Yeah, I still love her, yeah.
Was it fair to say that perhaps under those circumstances you may have felt a bit of jealousy?
No. I felt a bit hurt because the boys had seen him in the bed, but Sam swore black and blue that she's not sleeping with him or she's not having sex with him or anything of the nature, and I believe her.
So would you have any problems at all if they did have a relationship together?
No, not at all.
If he moved in?
He can move in there, that's fine.
To your knowledge, had Sam and Scotty ever had any arguments?
No, I don't think so.
Would you describe him as being a violent person?
Scotty? I don't think he's got a violent bone in his body.
Scott Knowles seemed to be very emotional, and I think at one occasion he may have had to have been restrained by a friend because he was very upset. So we obviously wanted to avoid confrontation and just took Michael straight upstairs. Scientific and Centre Crime officers then made examination of his room, took photographs, and he gave us clothing items that he said he wore the night before, which he had washed and were hanging on the line outside of his unit. Some people wouldn't allow police to do that. They didn't seem to be too reluctant in that regard, but he certainly came across as not being overly concerned in relation to us taking those samples and really trying to corroborate or otherwise his version of events as he gave to us during the interview.
Michael Bodsworth was escorted from the hotel to his parents' place to keep him out of harm's way. Not long after, the detectives were told of a discovery only streets away from here that would help them determine what really happened to Samantha on that Friday night.
On Friday night, 29-year-old Samantha Bodsworth left the Gympie Hotel where she worked and drove home. She never returned to have drinks with her boyfriend, her battered body found near Noosa's tourist strip yesterday morning. Samantha had worked at the hotel to help support her two sons, aged 5 and 7. She also did part-time charity work.
After the first 24 hours of the investigation, we had confirmation that the deceased was in fact Samantha Bodsworth. We had two prime persons of interest, that being Mr. Michael Bodsworth and Mr. Scott Knowles. However, to an extent, Mr. Bodsworth shone a bit brighter than Scott Knowles did.
Let's have a look at your hands. I just noticed before that you've got a cut there on you.
Yeah, got one there.
Right middle finger.
One there.
Well, this one's here.
Yeah.
That appears to be a fairly fresh sort of cut, that one there.
Obviously, we were interested in those to see whether they had any bearing on perhaps him being involved in Samantha's death.
Can you tell me where they came from?
Yeah, work.
From what? When did you do those?
Friday. You got another one there.
Oh, yeah.
So we photographed those.
Mr. Bodsworth was asked if he would voluntarily supply a specimen of his blood for the purpose of DNA. He declined this, saying that he didn't like needles too much, but was prepared to give us a mouth swab.
As the detectives waited for results from scrapings taken from underneath Samantha's nails to compare with the DNA provided by her ex-partner, forensic investigators were busy examining Samantha's car. It was found here, at the back of a nightclub in Gympie.
There were a number of flowers and bits of leaf and bark and other vegetative type items on the driver's seat and on the driver's floor. And around the back of the vehicle, jammed into the number plate holder, was a fairly large fluorescence which looked like pollen and was fairly consistent with those that we had seen earlier that day at Noosa.
The botanical specimens, along with other items like cigarette butts, were bagged for evidence. While the butts appeared to be the brand smoked by Samantha, it was noted they were the same as those bought by Michael Bodsworth when he had gone to Woolworths. He had given police the receipt and also a set of Samantha's keys that had mysteriously turned up in his room the night Samantha was murdered.
And he pointed out that her car key was missing from that set of keys.
They were in my room last night.
Where'd you get them from?
Sam must have left them behind. Because Sam's got a key to my room too.
Oh, okay. But do you have a personal set of keys?
No, I do not have a personal set of keys to Sam's house, no.
So the keys that she... I don't understand about the keys being in your room.
No, I don't understand either. But there's no car key, and the blue key's missing. She's got colour coded, and the blue one's not there, and the car key's not there.
We believe that the person who's responsible for her death has driven the vehicle.
One theory police are working on is that the mother of two young boys was abducted from Gympie, then driven to Noosa, where she was brutally murdered.
Anyone who may have seen the white Corolla registration 299CQO should contact police.
Later tonight, police will set up a major incident caravan here at the murder scene in the hope that someone will remember having seen Samantha, her car or her killer.
As a result of that, a local truck driver by the name of Mr. Higgins came forward.
On that night, come along a white car, travelling north my direction, going very slow. Got past him in the end, and up the next hill he passed me again, and got stuck behind him again, so I noticed it a bit more.
The truck driver, Mr. Higgins, was adamant that the registration number was exactly the same as the deceased, and it was her vehicle that he sighted on the highway.
While the truck driver did not get a good look at the driver or notice if there was a passenger, it was clear that whoever had driven Samantha's car had placed it back at the car park in Gympie for a very specific reason.
I think that Mr. Bodsworth put it there because it facilitates part of the grander scheme and his idea of committing the perfect murder.
We wanted to interview and speak to as many people as possible that could help us either corroborate Michael's version of the events or disprove it.
I was coming down the stairs at the Mount Pleasant Hotel, and down the bottom there was Sam and Michael talking, and they were very loud. I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about, but they were doing a lot of arguments lately since he moved into the hotel. Whoever she spoke to in the pub, any male, Michael would be right onto him, you know, or he'd be fist up or whatever, and he'd grab her arm and things like that. I mean, they did have quite a few arguments.
While Pauline was able to confirm Michael's story about the hot water system not working, it was the information she gave police about what he did on Saturday that was proving of great interest.
He said, I want to do a basket full of washing. He never did any washing because Sam always did his washing.
She'll come through, you know, she'll clean up my room and she'll take my washing home, or she'll ask me to bring the washing around.
And that wasn't the only strange thing he did.
When he had the kids, he used to take them places, you know. He'd take them to Big Pineapple or he'd take them for a drive somewhere, you know. But that particular day, he just stayed at the hotel all day, asking all the time, where's Sam?
And there was more.
That Mr. Bodsworth was inquiring with persons at the Mount Pleasant Hotel as to what the time on the Woolworths receipt meant. And he was questioning people as to what that is in normal time.
Do you know what time the purchase was made?
18:44 on there.
Do you always check the time on the document?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only way I get to tell the time. I don't wear a watch.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was very odd that he was saying that he had a receipt for cigarettes, because you wouldn't go around telling people that you'd just bought cigarettes and the time of it, you know.
The receipt, the keys, the washing, the broken down car. Walking to and from Samantha's place were all suspicious. But the police could not discredit Michael Bodsworth's version of events.
He had a pretty well constructed alibi. That led us to believe that he was either very confident, innocent, or possibly trying to convince the police that he was removing himself from this investigation and being a suspect.
We're waiting for information to come to us from our pathologists to try and give us some sort of direction as to where we need to go with this investigation.
No, it can't be easy.
In the meantime, the detectives were about to put their faith in the power of a psychic.
Well, you know, I've had Sam coming in. I've been talking to her and she just said, go and see Michael. She just keeps saying, go and see Michael.
A week after Samantha's murder, police had one hot suspect, but no evidence to arrest him.
Every day that goes by, that frustration increases, that feeling of inability to successfully finalise a chapter in a very, very sad story.
You were so happy. And now, so tragically gone from us. But your love and our memory of you will be in our hearts always.
A mother's words of sorrow as the tears flow in memory of Samantha Bodsworth. 100 people have packed the chapel at the Kalula Coast Crematorium to pay their final tribute. They vowed to never forget 29-year-old Samantha and to make sure her spirit lives on for the two boys she left behind.
The fact that no one had been arrested was very frustrating, especially for Sam's parents. There was no closure. Michael was still free. Unfortunately, the police didn't have anything to get him with straight away.
We weren't in a position to alleviate the Hall's pain. We weren't in a position to say, yes, we've been able to arrest anyone for this offence, because there was no evidence.
A number of persons came forward to assist us in the investigation. One of those being Patricia Kelly, who was known to both Samantha and Michael.
She's a tarot card reader, and she believed through previous readings with both of them that she had formed almost a bond with Michael. She believed that if Michael had done it, then she thought there was a chance that he might tell her.
Have you been?
Oh, getting it.
Yeah.
Got to stay out of the way of the ditch bomb for a while.
With Pat's permission, she wore a recording device on a person and arranged to meet Michael in a park in Gympie to try and see whether she could get any information out of him that would prove that his version that he gave police was untruthful and to see whether he would ultimately confess to her that he killed Samantha.
Well, you know, I've had Sam coming in. I've been talking to her and she just said, go and see Michael. She just keeps saying, go and see Michael. And I put the cards out and they weren't good. And it didn't look good for you, so whether it's
Nothing's been looking fucking good for me. So
I know. But she keeps pointing the finger at you, Michael, I have to tell you that. And if you've killed Sam and you want to talk to somebody, you can talk to me. I'm not going to judge you.
During this conversation with Kelly, Bodsworth maintained the alibi and the story that he supplied to us, and there was nothing significant that came out of it evidentiary-wise.
Michael, the problem is that you're under suspicion.
Well, I've given them.
Trouble is, though, they can't find the killer.
I've given them everything that they've asked for. Apart from blood. But they gave me a cotton wool to chew on.
Well, to get saliva or something.
Yeah. And they said, I'll give him his DNA. I said, yeah, well, that's fine. You'll find my DNA, Sam. Where's the fucking who's dead?
Those results were now back.
It was discovered that Mr. Bodsworth's DNA was present on a tea towel that was found in the kitchen and on the floor in the bedroom.
His DNA was also found on one of 5 cigarette butts found in the ashtray near Samantha's bed. But none of those in her car belonged to her ex-partner. The post-mortem pathology reports were a different matter.
The DNA came back under her fingernails of that belonging to Michael Bodsworth. Obviously that was a breakthrough in the investigation, and we now had something physical that we could work with to say that something has occurred between them that would have his DNA on her fingernails.
But the defence Michael Bodsworth had given his tarot card reader was good. He had lived in the house, was now a visitor, and freely admitted he and Samantha did have arguments. Police desperately needed to put him not just at her house, but at the place her body was dumped.
It seemed likely that the one link that we hoped would be the link between the vehicle, the clothing, and the scene was pollen.
Pollen evidence had never before been used in a murder case in Australia. In fact, it had only been used 9 times before worldwide. So it was going to take some time to investigate the possibilities and get the answers.
We have a pretty high burden of proof to be able to charge anyone with any offence. We wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, every avenue was exhausted and that we had everything that we could possibly get back before us to make a decision whether we had enough evidence to charge Michael Bodsworth.
It was now 3 months since Samantha had been murdered.
There was a custody hearing where Malcolm and Lynette Hall wanted to have full custody of the 2 boys. In their mind, Michael was responsible for Samantha's death, and they didn't want him to have custody of her children.
Custody on that day was awarded to Samantha's parents, and Mr. Bodsworth shortly thereafter left Queensland and went down to South Australia to reside.
When Michael Bodsworth went to Adelaide, when he lost custody of the children, we were very sceptical then whether we would get him.
I was terrified he would get away with it, because that meant I would have to use other resources that I don't know if I could live with. But we wanted to try and let the law take its course.
Before going, Michael Bodsworth left a further statement of his innocence.
A cross had been placed at the entrance to the car park in Hall Road, where Samantha's body was found. The location of the cross was nowhere near where the body was located, giving the impression that that's where he thought the body was placed, thus giving more credibility to his version that he didn't take part in her death.
Samantha Bodsworth's body was found among flowering acacia, or wattle trees. Samples had been routinely taken. When her car was located, pollen was also found in and outside of the vehicle. Police also had in their possession the washed clothes that Michael Bodsworth wore the night Samantha disappeared.
Now my job was to find out if the flowers in the car, on the tape lifts and in the vacuuming filter sample was the same as those species at Noosa. There were 2 acacia plants flowering at the time where Samantha's body was found, and one of them was like, it's a bushy type plant, then that species was Acacia sopherae. And this is the species that we found on the number plate, and we also found it in the vacuum filter from the car, in the front driver's side, which shows that the car had actually been in Noosa, right near the crime scene.
Dr. Milne could say this with certainty because acacia has a particular characteristic.
Acacia is insect and animal pollinated. It doesn't just fly in. It has to be transported by something. And so when somebody brushes against them and the plant's flowering, they get into the car, it transfers from their clothing onto the seat and whatever they have on their shoes.
In this case, it was the front driver's seat and floor of Samantha's car. Interestingly, the subject was brought up in the interview police conducted with Michael Bodsworth on the day Samantha's body was found.
Have you ever been in Sam's car? When was the last time in Sam's car?
About a week, I think.
Whereabouts in the car were you seated?
Passenger.
Front or back?
Front.
Okay, have you ever been in the driver's seat of that vehicle?
No.
So if Bodsworth was the guilty person, then we would expect to find some of that particular acacia pollen from Acacia sopherae on his clothing that would then put him into the car. Now, as I understand, his clothing was actually washed after the murder and before the police picked them up. So instead of thousands of pollen grains from acacia on there were only a few.
But it was enough. The clothes Michael Bodsworth wore that night were of a coarse texture and became a pollen trap. One wash couldn't rid the tiny microscopic evidence that had now put him at the place Samantha was dumped. However, before they could make an arrest, the police wanted to do one last check.
We then decided to walk the route that Mr. Bodsworth had told us he took that afternoon. That was for the purpose of ensuring that there were no acacia pollen trees along that route where the pollen may have gotten onto his clothes, thus having a legitimate reason for having the pollen on his clothes.
The plants that were growing around in that area were well off the path, and none of those particular species were flowering at the time. So I actually had pollen collected from the herbarium from those Gympie species, and I looked at that pollen to compare it with the Acacia sopherae pollen in Noosa, and they were totally different.
We travelled to South Australia, where we spoke with Mr. Bodsworth at a service station near Christie's Beach, and upon being informed that he was going to be returned to Queensland and charged with the murder, he was quite surprised and anxious.
The man has been arrested in Adelaide and charged with the brutal murder of his de facto wife in Gympie 8 months ago. The battered body of mother of 2 Samantha Bodsworth was found in sand dunes at Noosa.
It was on the way back that he, without any prompting, said that he wished to speak to us about it and tell us the truth. And because we didn't have any recordings with us, we asked him could he hold his information until we got back to Maroochydore where we had suitable equipment so we could electronically record his conversation.
All right, well, as I said before, what do you wish to tell us?
Well, Sam picked me up the night she died from Woolies. We got back to her place because I didn't have a shower in there.
What did he say? He said he saw you driving like an idiot in the car with the kids.
And she was telling me that after the weekend I can't see the kids and all this because the dads we didn't hear about I drive dangerously with the kids in the car. And the kids, they meant everything to me. And then she said I couldn't see them. So I sort of lost it.
What do you mean you lost it?
Well, I ended up streaming it somehow. I can't remember much about it.
Mr. Bosworth added that upon finding her deceased, he has panicked and not taken the course to ring the police. He chose to hide it. He has then changed Samantha into the clothes that she was found in on the Saturday morning by the terrace.
There was marks on the top, on the white top. There was some marks there. She wouldn't go out like that, so I changed it. I thought she was going mad.
Okay, alright.
No, she doesn't put everything in clothing when she goes out, so I changed it.
Whereabouts in the vehicle did you put it?
Front passenger seat.
Okay. And why'd you do that?
Because if I drive, that's where she won't sit.
He is very strong mentally, very, very strong. And I do not believe for 1 minute that his mind went blank in any way, shape or form. He knew exactly what he was doing, he planned it. But what he didn't reckon on was the DNA and the pollen and the fact that we knew, every single one of us who knew Sam knew that it was him.
Drove her car back to get me. And parked her car at the night disco. And that's it.
Can I ask you why you did that?
Was as if she went out for the night or something, you know.
When Samantha Bodsworth's body was found dumped in sand dunes at the Noosa Spit, her family suspected her former de facto, Michael James Bodsworth. 7 months later, the 36-year-old mechanic was charged with Samantha's murder after forensic evidence linked him to the scene. Despite confessing to police, though, Bodsworth pleaded not guilty.
Basically, when you're facing life imprisonment, you've got nothing to lose, so why not plead not guilty? Ultimately, the jury did see through him, and they believed the evidence that the police had gathered, the acacia pollen comparisons, which put him at the scene, the DNA, the blood found at her house, together with his confession. The jury were able to come back with a conviction of murder, and he got life imprisonment.
Unfortunately, life doesn't mean life. And you've taken someone's life away, and he's still living. He gets to get out eventually and have a life again. Samantha doesn't.
Michael Bodsworth will be eligible for parole in 2010.
I understand that Bodsworth thought that he'd committed the perfect crime, and I'm sure that he felt that he had, but science is always on the move, and there's always new developments in forensic science.
So was he smart? Was he cunning, conniving? I don't know. All I know is that he's been punished for something he did in the way that he should have been punished.
On a blistering August evening in 1987, the sky over a small Texas town burned the color of rust, and nobody knew yet that by sunrise their lives would split cleanly into a before and an after. Heat clung to the asphalt, cicadas screamed from the mesquite trees, and on County Road 16, a white pickup truck rolled past a faded sign that read in peeling green letters, "Welcome to Dryers Crossing, population 3,412. Safe, quiet. The kind of place folks drove through not to. The kind of place where people left doors unlocked and car keys in the ignition. The kind of place that believed bad things only happened on the 6 o'clock news, somewhere else." At 8:14 p.m., a 17-year-old girl named Emily Carter walked out of the Dairy Barn diner with a cherry cola in her hand and a shift behind her. She wore a name tag slightly crooked on her uniform, white sneakers darkened at the toes, and a friendship bracelet her best friend had braided on her wrist 2 days earlier. She joked with the fry cook, waved at the sheriff's deputy fueling his cruiser at the gas station across the street, and stepped into the thick heat of the parking lot, unaware that 3 people saw her leave that night, and nobody saw her arrive wherever she was going. Emily should have turned left toward the narrow sidewalk that led to her house 4 blocks away, past the Methodist church and the little park with the rusted swing set. But when the deputy later replayed the moment in his head over and over, he swore she hesitated. Just a flicker. Her head tilted, as if she heard something. Her free hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then she walked right instead, toward the back of the diner, toward the service alley that emptied out near the highway, toward a stretch of asphalt where streetlights flickered and died, and nobody bothered to fix them because nothing ever happened there. By 9:02 p.m., the cherry cola cup lay on its side in that alley, ice-melted, straw-bent. By 9:15, the deputy was back on patrol, headlights gliding over dark fields and quiet porches, completely unaware that the last person to see Emily Carter alive was him. By 10:30 p.m., the town settled into its ordinary summer night. Televisions glowing blue behind curtains, window units humming, dogs barking at nothing in particular. And somewhere between 8:14 and 10:30, Emily Carter vanished into the hot Texas dark, as if the earth had opened up and swallowed her whole. The next morning, Emily's alarm clock went off at 6 o'clock a.m., filling her small pink bedroom with a sharp electronic beeping that no one bothered to silence because Emily's mama assumed her daughter had left early for a double shift. At 7:10, the sound finally stopped when her younger brother unplugged the clock, grumbling about the noise. He didn't notice that the bed was perfectly made. He didn't notice that her shoes were missing, but her favorite denim jacket still hung over the back of her desk chair. He didn't notice that the cheap gold necklace she never took off lay coiled like a question mark on her nightstand. At 9:23 a.m., the phone rang at the dairy barn. The manager glanced at the schedule, saw Emily's name in blue ink for the morning shift, and frowned when the voice on the other end asked if she'd shown up early. He looked around the diner, the same truckers at the same counter stools, the same coffee pots burning on the same hot plates, the same sunlit dust drifting through the front windows. No Emily. He told her mama she wasn't there and hadn't been all morning. There was a pause, a silence that stretched thin, and something in that silence made the hair rise on the back of his neck. By noon, Sheriff Tom Randall had driven his cruiser to the Carter house, parking beneath a pecan tree that dropped brown leaves onto his windshield even in August. The sheriff was a big man with a reputation for dealing mostly with runaway cows, drunk drivers, and the occasional bar fight at the Lone Star Saloon. He wasn't built for headlines. He wasn't built for mysteries. When he stepped into Emily's bedroom, he saw the poster of a pop singer on the wall, the half-finished algebra homework open on the desk, the neat row of stuffed animals on the shelf. He'd seen scenes like this once before, years back, when his own daughter had decided to spend the night at a friend's house without telling anyone. He told himself this felt the same. It had to. But the longer he looked, the less it did. Emily's purse was still hanging on the doorknob. Her pay envelope from last week, untouched, lay in the second drawer. Her diary sat under her pillow, the last entry written the night before, full of ordinary teenage complaints. Summer heat, annoying little brother, new boy in town who tipped big and smiled bigger. Nothing about running away, nothing about plans, nothing about fear. Just one sentence at the bottom of the page, squeezed into the margin like an afterthought. Something weird happened in the alley after close. We'll write tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. By 1 o'clock p.m., the word missing floated through Dryer's Crossing like smoke. It curled inside the post office, whispered between hands sorting envelopes. It slid across the butcher counter at Miller's Market, passed along with paper-wrapped cuts of meat. It rode on the hot breeze between front porches, between neighbors who leaned over railings with narrowed eyes and hands clutching coffee mugs a little too tight. Emily Carter, the girl who always said yes to extra shifts, who sang along to the radio while filling salt shakers, who never stirred trouble. Gone. No note, no fight at home, no boyfriend to run off with, just gone. By 3:30 p.m., volunteers gathered at the church basement, sweat already darkening their t-shirts, ready to search the fields, the creek bed, the drainage ditches along County Road 16. They met the sheriff's eyes, looking for something solid, some anchor, a line in the sand between this and every bad story they'd ever watched unfold on television. "We're just being cautious," Sheriff Randall said, voice steady, hat in his hands. "She probably stayed out with friends, lost track of time. We'll find her." No one believed him, not really, but they nodded anyway, because in small towns, belief is often an act of will, not evidence. They searched until sunset painted the sky the color of dried blood, then pushed into the dark with flashlights and pickup headlights sweeping over tall grass and barbed wire. Dogs barked and lunged on leashes, catching every scent except the one that mattered. Deputies walked shoulder to shoulder through waist-high weeds, boots sinking into dusty ground cracked by heat. The fields gave them nothing, the creek gave them nothing, the ditches gave them nothing, the night swallowed their shouts whole. 2 days later, when the scent of hope had started to thin and the TV news vans had rolled into town with their bright lights and hungry microphones, a call came into the sheriff's office at 6:47 a.m. A farmer, voice shaking, reported something in the south pasture near the old irrigation canal. Something pale, something that didn't belong. Deputies arrived first, sirens off, tires crunching gravel in slow, deliberate turns. The sheriff followed behind, hands tight on the wheel, stomach knotted in a dread he still refused to name. The south pasture stretched out flat and empty under a white-hot sky, cow tracks crisscrossing dry earth. The old irrigation canal, long since drained, cut through the field like a scar. It was there, at the edge of crumbling concrete, that they found the first trace of Emily Carter. A white sneaker, laces double-knotted, lying on its side in the dust as if she'd stepped right out of it. The sneaker was clean. Too clean. No mud, no blood, no tear in the fabric, just a faint scuff on the toe, the kind a person gets from normal life, not from being dragged. 6 feet away, they found the second sneaker. The space between them, a neat, measured gap, looked wrong in a way no one could quite put into words. Not scattered, not thrown, placed. Beyond them, the concrete lip of the canal dropped into shadow. It was dry down there, weeds pushing up through cracks, beer cans, and broken glass glittering in the gloom. No body, no trace of a struggle, no obvious answer, just that pair of shoes sitting in the sun like an accusation. For the first time since Emily's mother called his office, Sheriff Randall let go of the comforting lie that this was just a teenage mistake. He called in the Rangers. He called in forensics from Austin. And quietly, he told his deputies what none of them wanted to hear. We're not looking for a runaway anymore. We're looking for a victim. The Rangers arrived 3 hours later, gray sedans rolling through the dust, boots stepping out onto scorched grass that crunched underfoot. Cameras clicked. Notes were taken. The morning sun already hammered the scene with a punishing glare. One of the Rangers, a quiet man named Ellis Ward, crouched by the canal and stared at the two sneakers like they were a riddle carved in chalk. No footprints between them, no drag marks, no sign of panic or fight. It looked staged. It looked cruel. He wrote down one word in his notebook: message. By afternoon, the news trucks had multiplied. Reporters leaned against their cars, sweat staining their collars, shouting questions the sheriff refused to answer. Helicopters hovered, their blades slicing the hot air above the pasture. The town that once couldn't fill a column inch in the local paper now stretched across every Texas broadcast with the same headline: teen missing in Dryers Crossing, community in shock. Mothers locked their doors for the first time. Fathers sat on porches with shotguns propped against their knees. The air thickened with fear, and every shadow looked like a secret. The Rangers searched for days. They dug shallow trenches near the canal. They drained a section of the old creek. They brought in dogs again, this time cadaver-trained. Nothing, just dry dirt, stubborn silence, and the steady hum of insects that didn't care about human grief. Sheriff Randall watched his men wilt in the heat, watched the town turn suspicious, watched his phone ring with tips that led nowhere. Each day the hope in people's voices grew smaller, thinner, like the last thread on a fraying rope. On the 5th night, when the search officially paused, a storm rolled in from the south. Lightning split the horizon, thunder cracked over empty fields, and rain poured hard enough to erase every footprint left behind. Some said the storm came too late. Some said it washed away the truth. Either way, by dawn the canal was clean, scrubbed by nature, wiped of everything that might have spoken for Emily Carter. A week later, Sheriff Randall called a press conference on the courthouse steps. His voice shook once, just once, when he said they were continuing to follow every lead. Behind him, Emily's mother stood pale and silent, clutching the friendship bracelet her daughter used to wear. Reporters shouted her name, asked if she believed Emily was still alive. She didn't answer. She didn't blink. The sheriff ended the briefing early. The cameras turned off. The headlines moved on. The town was left alone with its ghosts. But not everyone forgot. Ellis Ward didn't. He kept the case file open on his desk long after everyone else had filed theirs away. He'd drive through Dryers Crossing on his way to other investigations, park near the diner, and just sit, watching, thinking. The girl's face, bright smile, brown eyes, stuck with him like a song that wouldn't stop playing. He went back to the canal more times than he could count, walking the edges, tracing the same hopeless grid. He knew something was missing. He could feel it, like static in the air before a lightning strike. Then one night, 4 months after the disappearance, a man came into the sheriff's office, nervous, drunk, smelling of motor oil and sweat. Said he'd seen something that night. Said he'd kept quiet because he didn't want trouble. Said there was a pickup, dark blue, parked near the alley behind the diner. Engine running, headlights off. He couldn't see who was inside, but he swore he heard a voice, young, female, say, "You're not supposed to be here." Then a door slammed, then silence. The man's name was Roy Calhoun. The sheriff knew him, a mechanic, part-time drinker, full-time storyteller, not the kind of witness you wanted on a case like this. But when Ellis asked him to show exactly where he'd been, Roy's hand trembled as he pointed to the alley. He remembered the truck's bumper sticker, a faded red decal shaped like the state of Texas, peeling on one corner. It wasn't much, but it was something. They checked every blue pickup in the county, 42 in total, none matched. No one came forward. The lead died as fast as it appeared. A month later, Roy Calhoun drove his truck into a ditch after midnight and broke his neck. Accident, they said. But Ellis Ward wrote another word in his notebook beside the first. Pattern. Winter came. The fields went gray. The town retreated inward, pretending to move on. But the empty chair at the Carter family's dinner table didn't move on. The locker at the high school, covered in photos and ribbons, didn't move on. And Sheriff Randall, now slower, heavier, older by a decade and months, found himself standing outside that same alley one night, staring at the flickering light above the dumpster. He whispered to no one, "Where'd you go, Emily?" The wind answered with dust. Years crawled by. The diner changed owners. The sheriff retired. The case file gathered layers of dust in a cardboard box labeled simply Carter, Emily, missing person. But Ellis Ward never stopped. When DNA testing began to reshape old investigations in the early 2000s, he reopened the box, requested the evidence, the sneakers, the laces, the cherry cola cup. Everything had been stored in airtight plastic. He sent it to the state lab with a handwritten note, for testing, anything at all. 2 months later, the results came back. Partial DNA on the inside of one shoe tongue, male, not familial to the victim, not in the system, unknown, unmatched, a ghost. But it meant one thing: she hadn't walked away. Someone had been close enough to touch her, close enough to take her. Ellis retired in 2005, but the case followed him home like a shadow. He kept a copy of the crime scene photo, just the sneakers in the dust, pinned above his desk. He'd sit there late at night, drink black coffee gone cold, and stare at it until the edges blurred. The shoes faced east, toward the rising sun. He always wondered if that meant anything, if it was deliberate, if whoever left them there had wanted the world to look and see. Then came the call. 36 years later, a new analyst working with the Texas Cold Case Division found a hit. Not a name, a pattern, a match between the unknown DNA and samples collected from an unsolved abduction in another county. Same decade, same method, same eerie detail. Shoes removed, placed neatly side by side. The suspect had died in 1999. A drifter, a repairman, a man who'd worked for 3 months at a gas station in Dryers Crossing. The lab called it a tentative link. Ellis called it an answer, half an answer, but still an answer. He drove back to Dryers Crossing one last time, parking near the diner. The alley was paved now, brighter, cleaner, the old flickering light replaced by LEDs, but the air still felt heavy like it remembered. He stood there as the sun sank behind the grain silos and said quietly, "We found you, Emily." The wind stirred dust again, same as before. What no one could explain, what still haunts the town, was the final discovery. When archivists cleaned out the sheriff's old evidence storage earlier that year, they found a cardboard box mislabeled Property Room, MSC. Inside were 2 photographs that didn't belong to any official file, Polaroids, both taken near the canal, same spot, different days. One showed the shoes, untouched. The other showed them again, but this time they faced west. Someone had gone back, someone had turned them, and whoever it was, they were never found. Whoever it was, they were never found. And in a town like Dryers Crossing, that kind of unfinished sentence hangs in the air for decades like a siren you can't shut off. Time did what it always does. It moved. Kids grew up, moved away, came back for holidays with new haircuts and city accents. The diner changed its name twice. The Dairy Barn sign came down, replaced by a sleeker logo and a digital menu board. But underneath the fresh paint and the LED lights, the story stayed, buried shallow, close enough to scrape your knuckles on if you dug just a little too hard. Emily Carter, 1987, missing. No body, no trial, no confession, just 2 sneakers in the dust and a box of evidence gathering dust in return. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, the word "solved" dropped into town like a bomb. It started with a notification on a phone. Emily's younger brother, Jason now, 40-something, thinning hair, permanent crease between his eyebrows, was drinking bad coffee in his Houston apartment, scrolling through headlines before work. He almost missed it. Texas Rangers announced breakthrough in 1987 cold case. He clicked without thinking. More muscle memory than curiosity, the way you poke at an old scar just to see if it still hurts. The article loaded slow. His heart didn't. It sprinted. There it was, his sister's name, the town name, the words linked through DNA to deceased suspect. They called it closure. They called it justice delayed. They called it a miracle of modern forensic science. They called it solved. Jason didn't feel anything close to solved. 2 hours later, the local station in Dreer's Crossing broke special coverage. Cameras set up on the courthouse lawn again, though the courthouse itself had a new coat of paint, a new flag, a new sheriff behind the podium. Sheriff Elena Ruiz, sharp-eyed, straight-backed, the first woman to hold the job in the county. She'd inherited the badge and the ghosts, both. Behind her, a board with photos. Emily's school picture, the crime scene sneakers, a grainy mugshot of a man no one in town recognized at first glance. Name, Luther Hale. Employment records, mechanic, handyman, drifter. Dead since 1999. Buried under a name and a prison number in another county's Potter's Field. The sheriff cleared her throat, knowing every word would be replayed, dissected, judged. Today, thanks to advances in forensic technology and the hard work of the Texas Cold Case Division, she said, we can confirm that DNA recovered from evidence in the disappearance of Emily Carter matches DNA from an unsolved abduction in Kearney County, Texas. The suspect in that case, Luther Hale, is now believed to be the perpetrator in Emily's disappearance. At this time, based on the totality of the evidence, we are closing the case as cleared by death of the offender. The words sounded clean, official, sanitized, cleared by death, tidy phrase for a messy hole in reality. Reporters pounced. Sheriff, does this mean you found the body? No. Was Hale connected to Dreer's Crossing before the disappearance? Yes. He'd worked at a now-closed gas station off the highway, just 6 minutes from the diner. Was he questioned back in 1987? No, his name never surfaced. He left town weeks after Emily vanished. Do you believe he acted alone? The sheriff paused just a fraction too long. Cameras zoomed in. Based on current evidence, she said carefully, we believe he was solely responsible. Current evidence, solely responsible. Phrases like scaffolding over a structure that didn't feel stable yet. Across the street, leaning against a brick wall just out of frame, an old man in a worn denim jacket listened with his jaw clenched. Sheriff Randall, long retired, white hair sticking out from under a ball cap that had seen better days. He'd driven in early, sat through the briefing, felt his throat tighten at the sight of Emily's picture on the board. The word solved didn't sit right in his chest. It felt premature, like announcing a verdict before the jury even sat down. Still, he nodded along with the rest, because what else do you do when the state calls it done? You stand there, you smile for the cameras, you let the town exhale. The town did exhale for about 5 minutes. Then the other word leaked out, the word nobody said from the podium, the word that crawled out of the evidence room, whispering through the grapevine. Polaroids, 2 of them, unlogged, unaccounted for, found in a misfiled box. One with the sneakers facing east, one with the sneakers turned west. Timestamp smudged, no initials, no chain of custody, no reason to exist, just there. The Cold Case Division mentioned them in the internal report, not in the press release. To them, they were weird, but not decisive. To the people who'd lived under the weight of the case for 36 years, they were an alarm bell. The first person outside law enforcement to see those photos was not a detective, it was not a lawyer, it was a woman with a microphone and a YouTube channel. She arrived in town a week after the announcement, driving a rental SUV with out-of-state plates and 3 cameras in the back. Her name was Claire Monroe. Her channel, Dead Air, Unsolved America, millions of subscribers, thumbnails full of red circles and yellow arrows and words like chilling detail and what police missed. She specialized in the gap between official story and private horror. When the headline Texas 1987 Cold Case Solved hit the algorithm, she booked a ticket before the video finished rendering in her mind. She started the way she always did, B-roll of the diner, neon sign buzzing in the dusk, cars pulling in and out, slow pan across the courthouse steps, voiceover low, steady, cinematic. Small town, big secret, a case that haunted Texas for nearly 4 decades, suddenly declared solved. But what if the story they're telling isn't the whole truth? Her viewers love that line, the idea that under every press conference there's another story deeper and darker begging to be told. Claire did what the original investigators did and what the internet age demands. You start with people. She talked to former classmates who still called Emily M, like she might walk through the door any minute. She sat with the diner's current owner, who kept a laminated newspaper clipping behind the register like a relic. She knocked on the door of the Carter house, now smaller somehow, as if grief had shrunk it from the inside. Emily's mother didn't come to the door, Jason did. He didn't want to talk at first, couldn't. Not to strangers, not to cameras, not to anyone who treated his sister's life like content. But Claire didn't push. She left a card. A day later, he called. They met at a park bench under a dying oak, far from the diner, far from the canal, but still inside the invisible border of the story. I'm supposed to be grateful, he said, staring at the ground. They said solved on TV. People keep telling me, now you can move on. Move on to what? They didn't find her. They didn't tell us where she is. They just gave us a name of a dead man and closed the folder. Claire listened, the small recorder in her pocket humming quietly. Do you believe he did it? She asked. Jason shrugged, a gesture equal parts anger and exhaustion. I believe somebody did. I believe she didn't walk out into a field and disappear on her own. But I also believe there's more. My sister wrote in her diary that something weird happened in that alley the night before she disappeared. They never figured out what. They just stopped trying. The diary, the line, something weird happened in the alley. Claire wrote it down, highlighted it in her mind. That was a hook, a cold case headline in a single sentence. She asked permission to see the diary. Jason said no, not yet. Too personal, too raw. But he told her what he remembered. The way Emily had seemed distracted that last week, glancing at the back door whenever the bell above the diner chimed. The way she'd said, half joking, that someone kept calling the diner and hanging up when she answered. The way she'd mentioned a truck, dark blue bumper sticker peeling, parked too long near the back lot. Dark blue truck, Roy Calhoun's drunk confession, the bumper sticker shaped like Texas. The same detail resurfacing 36 years later in a stranger's notepad. Claire tried to get the official file. No luck at first, cold case or not, a closed investigation or not, there were limits. But something about the new sheriff worked in her favor. Ruiz wasn't interested in cover-ups. She believed in sunshine and scrutiny. As long as you respect the family, she told Claire, I have no problem with you asking questions. Just don't promise answers I can't give. Eventually, through a mix of persistent requests and one sympathetic clerk at the county records office, Claire got what she wanted. Access to redacted copies of key documents, witness statements, early suspect lists, evidence logs. That's when she saw the anomaly. The original evidence log from 1987 listed the sneakers, the cola cup, fibers from the alley, soil samples from the canal, even cigarette butts from near the fence line, but no mention of Polaroids, not one. The storage box inventory from the late 90s, still nothing. The Polaroids only appeared in a handwritten note from a property officer in 2001. Found loose in mislabeled box placed with case file Carter. No officer's initials, no explanation, no indication they'd ever been reviewed by rangers or the district attorney. It was as if they'd materialized out of nowhere and then sunk back into the paperwork swamp. Claire's hands shook slightly as she flipped the printed copies on the motel bed. She'd seen sloppy documentation before, especially in small departments from the 80s. But 2 unsourced photos of a critical scene, that was different. That wasn't just sloppy. That was eerie. She asked herself the question her audience would ask. Who took these, and why didn't they want their name attached? When she finally saw them, high-resolution scans granted grudgingly by the lab, viewed on her laptop in the glow of the motel's cheap lamp, her breath stalled. The first image was almost exactly like the crime scene photo everyone had seen. The 2 white sneakers near the canal, facing east, toes pointing toward the pale horizon. No ruler, no evidence marker, just the shoes and a thin slice of the drought-cracked ground. The second image, same angle, same lighting, maybe taken minutes or hours later, showed the sneakers turned, heels where toes had been, now facing west. Nothing else in the frame moved, not a rock, not a weed, just the shoes. If it was a hoax, it was a cruel one. If it wasn't a hoax, it meant someone had gone back to the scene before or after the official photographers, touched the evidence, altered its position, and documented it for themselves. Someone with access or someone bold enough to sneak under the tape. Someone who wanted a private copy of the scene. A trophy, or a message. Claire hit record on her audio device, not for the channel, not yet, but for herself. Texas 1987 cold case solved, she murmured, echoing the headline in a flat tone. Solved, except the crime scene was rearranged off the record. Solved, except a key witness died in a suspicious accident. Solved, except the main suspect is dead and never confessed. Solved, except the victim's diary hinted at something weird the night before, and no one ever figured out what that was. Solved on paper, still screaming in the dirt. She closed the laptop and sat back on the creaking mattress, listening to the air conditioner rattle. Outside, the neon from the motel sign bled through the curtains, strobing red, then dark, then red again. She thought about the drifter, the dead man whose DNA had bridged 2 cases. She thought about the gas station he'd worked at, about how many people passed through his orbit without knowing it. She thought about the blue pickup with the peeling bumper sticker and the man who'd seen it, now buried with his own secrets. Most of all, she thought about those turned shoes. Silent, stubborn, wrong. They didn't fit with the clean press conference, the sharp uniforms, the phrase, cleared by death. They didn't fit with a lone drifter theory, shoes don't move themselves, evidence doesn't reposition because of a gust of wind. Somebody took that second photo, somebody made a choice. In a case where every official line now pointed to a suspect who could no longer speak, those shoes whispered something else. You're not done. Keep looking. In the morning, Claire would drive to the edge of town, to the overgrown lot where the old gas station once stood. She would walk its cracked foundation, camera rolling, voice low and relentless, asking the questions the town had learned to swallow. She would trace the route from there to the diner, then from the diner to the canal, watching the sun burn overhead the same way it had in 1987. She would call her next episode, Texas 1987 Cold Case Solved, but Who Turned the Shoes? And somewhere in a house where the curtains were always drawn just a little too tight, someone would hear that title and their hand would start to shake. Someone would hear that title and their hand would start to shake, because back in 1987 they thought the story was over when the cameras went away, and now here it was again, resurrected, sharpened, labeled with a single word they didn't recognize anymore, solved. The notification pinged on an aging laptop, on a cracked tablet, on a phone that still vibrated a little too loudly on the kitchen counter. A thumbnail. The alley behind the diner, bathed in cinematic shadow. A woman's face in the corner, serious, focused. Text in bold white. Texas 1987 Cold Case Solved, but Who Turned the Shoes? Clickbait, some would scoff. Bait, others would whisper. For who? At 7:12 a.m., in a one-story house on a quiet side street of Dryers Crossing, a man in his 60s with shaky hands and a drawer full of old uniforms clicked on that video and felt the past rush at him like a freight train. The curtains were half open. Dust hung in the light. The TV in the corner was muted, looping the county news. On his lap, the laptop screen bloomed into motion, drone shot of the town, slow zoom on the courthouse, then a dissolve to the old canal, now half choked with weeds. Over it, Claire's voice, low and controlled. For 36 years, the disappearance of 17-year-old Emily Carter haunted this Texas town. Last month, authorities declared the case solved, but buried in the evidence is a small, unsettling detail that changes everything. The man's name was never spoken in the video, not in part 1, not in part 2, but his face flushed as if it had been called out over loudspeakers. He hadn't worn the badge in years, hadn't stepped foot in the property room since before the new sheriff took over. Still, he knew exactly where those Polaroids had sat, unlogged, for far too long. Third shelf, second box from the left, mismarked, misplaced, like a secret that somebody tried to hide and then forgot where they'd put it. He watched the segment on the Polaroids without breathing. The edited scan appeared on screen, the sneakers stark against the cracked dirt, and Claire's voice wrapped around the image like a noose. This photo, she said, has never been publicly released. It shows the shoes recovered near the old irrigation canal, placed just as they were found. But another photo, taken from the exact same angle, shows something different. Cut to the second scan, shoes turned, toes pointing the other way, no explanation. Shoes don't turn themselves, she murmured. If the suspect acted alone, who was still at the scene, moving evidence, taking pictures, after the official photographers left? The man closed the laptop with a snap that made the mug on his coffee table jump. For a moment, the room rang with the echo. His heart thudded against his ribs, loud, insistent. He swallowed hard, tasted metal. He told himself what he'd been telling himself since 2001, when he first saw those photos in a box that shouldn't have contained anything from the Carter case. It was a mix-up. Somebody filed them wrong. Somebody forgot to log them. Somebody else's mistake. Somebody else's problem. But the video pressed on, even with the screen black. Her words stayed in his ears. Who turned the shoes? Across town, Claire wasn't thinking about the man in the small house yet. She was thinking about concrete and ghosts. The old gas station had been torn down in the late 90s. All that remained now was a faded rectangle of cracked asphalt, a bent signpost with no sign, and the concrete footprint of what used to be the office and service bays. Weeds pushed through the gaps, stubborn, bright green against gray. Trucks roared past on the highway, but the lot itself felt like a dead pocket of air, a place the world had decided not to look at anymore. Claire stepped out of her SUV with her camera already rolling. The morning sun sat low, throwing long shadows from the signpost. She walked slowly, letting the gravel crunch under her boots, letting the mic pick up the sound. This, she said softly, more to herself than to the audience, is where he worked. 3 months, one paycheck stub, a name on a time card, a ghost behind a counter. Luther Hale. Ordinary, forgettable, the kind of man who blended into the background, exactly the kind of man who slips through investigations. She paused near what used to be the entrance to the office, towing a rusted lug nut with her shoe. In 1987, she continued, voice threading into narrating mode, this station sat just off the highway, 6 minutes from the diner where Emily Carter worked her last shift. Rangers later discovered that Hale clocked out early the night she disappeared. His supervisor didn't think much of it. People left early all the time back then. No digital logs, no cameras, no automatic alerts, just a scribbled note on a paper schedule. L. Hale, left at 7:30. She looked up at the highway, at the endless river of cars. No one remembers seeing him after that. She traced the route in real time, driving from the ghost of the gas station to the alley behind the diner with the camera on the dashboard. 6 minutes, she said as the timer ticked on the screen. 2 turns, 1 stop sign. That's all it would have taken. The diner loomed into view, polished and modernized, but the bricks at its base were the same ones that had soaked up the summer heat in 1987. Claire parked out back, staring at the service alley where the light now burned steady, unwavering. The night before she vanished, she recapped. Emily wrote that something weird happened here. We still don't know what, but we do know a dark blue truck was seen here the night she disappeared. A truck with a peeling Texas-shaped bumper sticker, and we know the man who saw it, the man who reported that to police, died in a single-vehicle accident months later. The word hung in the car, heavy with implication. Accident. She found the skid marks in the old photos. Pawed through the crash report. Late night. Empty road. Roy Calhoun's truck flipped into a ditch after leaving the Lone Star Saloon. Blood alcohol above the legal limit. No sign of another vehicle. Case closed. File stamped. No one in authority connected his death to his statement about the blue truck, at least not on paper. But humans don't live on paper. When she had interviewed the bartender who'd been working the night Roy died, the man, now gray-haired, arms still corded with muscle from years of hauling kegs, had said something that stuck in her mind. Roy was drunk, sure. He'd grunted, cleaning a glass that didn't need cleaning. But he wasn't that drunk. I cut him off early. He stayed a while anyway. Said he had a bad feeling. Said he thought somebody was watching him. I told him to go home and sleep it off. Next day, I heard he was dead in a ditch. Maybe that's coincidence. Maybe everything's coincidence. But I still wish I'd walked him to his truck. Claire replayed that audio in her head now as she stepped out into the alley, camera in hand. She let the lens linger on the back door of the diner, on the dumpster, on the shadowed strip of asphalt where the blue truck might have idled. If Hale was the only predator in this story, she murmured into the mic, then why does the ground keep whispering about someone else? She wasn't alone in her doubts. 3 counties away, in a small house cluttered with boxes and dust and old case files, retired Ranger Ellis Ward sat at his desk. The word solved flashing across his television screen for the 100th time. The news station had picked up Claire's video there too, folding it into their coverage. Online true crime host questions, official narrative, the anchor said, smile tight. A clip played. Claire's voice describing the turned shoes, the unanswered questions. Ellis watched, jaw tightening. They hadn't told him about the second Polaroid. 30-plus years working the job, and he'd found out about a key piece of the puzzle from a YouTube video. He reached for his old notebook, the one that still smelled faintly of dust and engine oil, flipped to the page labeled Carter, Emily. Names, times, sketches, a rough map of the canal. The shoes. He remembered standing there in that heat, hat brim damp with sweat, staring at those sneakers and feeling something crawl along his spine. He wrote down message because that was the only word that came close. Now, knowing that someone had stood in that same spot with a Polaroid camera and turned them, he wrote another word in the margin. Hands slower now, but still steady. Inside. Inside job, inside access, inside the tape. He called the number he'd kept since the new sheriff took office. Sheriff Ruiz answered on the second ring, her voice tired but clear. Elena, he said, skipping pleasantries, we need to talk about those photos. She didn't pretend not to know which ones. Thought you might call, she said. You saw the video? He grunted, a sound that meant yes, and also meant he wasn't thrilled about learning departmental secrets from a stranger online. The Polaroids surfaced before my time, she admitted. Property officer found them boxed wrong, logged them as soon as he realized they belonged to Carter. The Rangers were notified. It's in the cold case notes. Not in mine, Ellis snapped. There was a pause, static crackling down the line. Maybe the memo didn't travel as far as it should have, Ruiz said carefully. Point is, lab didn't pull anything useful off them. No prints, no identifiable background besides what we already know. They didn't change the working theory. Ellis stared at the photo pinned above his desk, the official one, the east-facing shoes. Behind it now, he imagined a phantom layer, the west-facing shot, hidden, turned. Theory ought to change when somebody's messing with your scene, he muttered. Who had access? Back then, Ruiz sighed. Half the county. Deputies, volunteers, sheriff, rangers, fire, EMS. It was a circus. You know that. Protocol wasn't what it is now. Who had access to the evidence room in 2001? He pressed. Another sigh. Fewer people, she said. Some of them are dead. Some of them are alive and not returning my calls. He closed his eyes briefly, saw the property room as it had been. Shelves of boxes, handwriting fading, labels peeling. Anyone with a key and enough nerve could have slipped something in, moved something out. You going to reopen it? He asked. It's already closed as cleared, she said. On paper, we got our man. State's happy, DA's happy, family got their name. But unofficially, her voice dropped. Unofficially, I've got questions, and I don't like loose ends. Good, he said, because there's something else you should know. He told her about Roy's death, not as it looked in the file, but as it felt in the bar, in the words of a man who'd been cut off early and still wound up in a ditch. He told her how, weeks before that crash, Roy had called him at home, late, breath slurred, but eyes. Ellis remembered this clearly, stone sober. How he'd said, I ain't crazy, Ward. That truck's still hanging around. Same sticker, same noise in the engine. Man parks just out of the camera's view at the 7-Eleven, just sits there. Nobody ever sees him go in. How Ellis had promised to look into it and then gotten pulled into another case, another emergency, another fire that needed putting out. How he never made that follow-up call. How he attended Roy's funeral out of quiet, gnawing guilt. On the other end of the line, Ruiz was silent for a long beat. That conversation is not in the report, she said finally. Never said it was, Ellis replied. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. So what are you thinking? She asked. He looked at the photo again, at the shoes, at the invisible hands that had turned them. I'm thinking Luther Hale wasn't the only one orbiting that alley, he said. I'm thinking somebody local saw something, maybe more than they should have. I'm thinking somebody didn't like a drunk mechanic talking to the Rangers. He rubbed his forehead. And I'm thinking if that somebody had access to the scene and the evidence, we're not just talking about a drifter. We're talking about a helper or a cleaner. A helper, a cleaner. Words that didn't belong in the same sentence as solved, but there they were, sitting side by side. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the grain silos and the streetlights flickered on one by one, Claire set up her camera in the motel room and hit record on a segment she hadn't planned to film. The script pages on her laptop were open, but she didn't look at them. She stared straight into the lens, eyes dark, voice stripped of the usual theatrics. When a case is declared solved, she said quietly, we like to believe that means every question has an answer. That's not how real life works. Sometimes a case is solved enough for the paperwork, enough for the press release, enough for the politicians. But what about what's left over? What about the parts that don't fit? She lifted a printed copy of the Polaroid scan, holding it up just long enough for the lens to catch the outline of the turned shoes before lowering it again. If Luther Hale took Emily, she continued, and evidence points strongly that he did, then we have one piece of the puzzle. But these photos hint at another pair of hands, another presence, another shadow at the edge of the frame. She leaned back, exhaled, let the motel's silence press in. Her channel thrived on mystery, on doubt, on stories that refused to stay inside neat lines. But this one dug under her skin in a way others hadn't. Maybe it was the diary line, maybe it was the blue truck, maybe it was the idea that someone who wore the same badges, the same uniform she'd been taught to trust as a kid might have stepped over a line and never looked back. Outside, in that same town, porch lights flicked on. Televisions glowed with the evening news. Some screens played sports, some played sitcom reruns, some played her face and her voice, spliced into local coverage that couldn't resist the drama. In one house, the retired sheriff watched with a mix of pride and pain. In another, the man who once had keys to the evidence room stared at the black laptop screen he'd snapped shut that morning, listening to the muffled echo of her words from the TV next door. He got up, walked to a hallway closet, opened the door with fingers that remembered another key, another lock. On the top shelf, above old coats and a box of Christmas lights, sat a battered shoebox with no label. Inside, under a rubber band that had long since lost its stretch, lay a stack of old Polaroids, some of family barbecues, some of hunting trips, some of nothing in particular, clouds, fences, board experiments with a camera, and near the bottom, 2 shots from a hot August day in 1987, the canal, the dust, the shoes, one facing east, one facing west. He stared at them until his vision blurred, until the edges melted into white. He told himself he'd found them that way, that he hadn't done anything wrong, that he'd just wanted a copy of the scene because the case got under his skin and he couldn't let it go. He told himself he had good reasons. People always think they have good reasons. But memory is a slippery thing, especially when you've spent years polishing it into something you can live with. In another county, under a marker that listed only a last name and a number, the man officially blamed for everything lay silent. No defense, no explanation, no confession. His DNA told the story the state wanted to hear. His death made him a safe villain. He couldn't talk back. He couldn't sue. He couldn't stare into a camera and say, I was there, but I wasn't alone. So the question hung there, heavy, unavoidable, pulsing through Claire's recording devices, through Ellis's notebooks, through Ruiz's late-night drives past the canal, through Jason's insomnia. If the cold case was solved, why did it still feel like something, or someone, was missing from the official story? Out on the edge of town, where the pavement ended and the dirt road began, the old irrigation canal cut its shadow into the landscape, same as it had for decades. Wind whispered over the cracked concrete. An owl shifted on a fence post. The ground held its secrets the way it always had. Tight, patient, indifferent. Somewhere out there, in the dust that remembered every step, the truth still lay in pieces. The state had picked up one piece and called it enough. The rest waited, quietly, for someone willing to get their hands dirty. Someone willing to get their hands dirty did show up. Not a ranger, not a deputy, not a state lab tech in a white coat. A woman with a camera bag, a laptop, and a talent for turning unanswered questions into headlines that wouldn't go away. The morning after she filmed her late-night motel segment, Claire woke to a phone buzzing on the nightstand, vibrating itself in circles like it was trying to escape. Unknown number, local area code. She answered, voice still rough with sleep. "This is Claire." A pause, breathing, a crackle of cheap reception, then a man's voice, older, rasped at the edges. "You the one stirring up old ghosts on the internet?" he asked. No greeting. No name, just the accusation hanging there. She sat up, swung her legs over the edge of the bed. "Depends who's asking," she said. "You law enforcement?" A bitter little laugh. "Was once, long time ago." Another pause. "I saw your video about the shoes." The way he said shoes told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't a casual viewer, not some armchair detective looking for a shout-out. This was someone who'd stood near that canal when the tape was still up. She switched on the recorder on instinct, thumb sliding over the button out of habit more than calculation. "And what did you think?" she asked. He ignored the question. "You want to know who turned him?" he said. "Meet me. No cameras, no recording." Her eyes flicked to the blinking red light on the device in her hand. She covered it with her palm as if he could see. "Where?" she asked. He named a place she didn't recognize at first. A fishing access down by a reservoir 10 miles outside town. Public enough to be safe, isolated enough to talk. "Give me an hour," she said. He hung up without answering. An hour and 17 minutes later, she pulled into a gravel lot beside a stretch of water the color of tarnished coins. Thin trees clung to the bank, their roots gripping the mud like fingers. A single truck sat near the far end of the lot. Older model, faded paint, no bumper stickers. She parked closer to the entrance, habit, and watched. The man climbed out slowly, one hand braced on the doorframe like his knees didn't trust him anymore. He wore jeans that had seen work, not fashion. A plaid shirt, no hat. His hair was white and thin, his face deeply lined in the way of someone who'd spent most of his life outdoors. She recognized him from old photos she'd pulled for B-roll but hadn't used yet. Sheriff Tom Randall, retired. He'd been in the background of 1987 footage, blinking in the harsh glare of TV lights. He walked toward her, movements stiff but deliberate. She stepped out to meet him halfway, the reservoir breeze tugging at her hair. "Sheriff Randall," she said. "Not anymore," he muttered. "Now I'm just Tom." They stood facing each other for a heartbeat, sizing each other up. He glanced at the camera sitting on the passenger seat. "You left it in the car," he said, like he was checking a condition off a list. "Appreciate that." She didn't mention the phone recording in her pocket, now switched off. This wasn't an on-the-record moment, not yet. "You called me about the shoes," she said. He looked out at the water, jaw tight. "Didn't say I did," he replied. "Might have been anybody. 8,000 people watched that video last time I checked. Probably more by now." But his eyes didn't leave the surface of the reservoir, and his left hand kept opening and closing at his side, as if trying to squeeze something invisible out of his palm. "Okay," she said softly, "then let me start another way. You were sheriff when Emily disappeared. You stood at that canal. You saw the scene yourself." He nodded once, reluctantly. "And now the state says it's solved," she continued. "Case cleared. Drifter did it. Ribbon cut. Everybody go home." She let the sarcasm brush the edges of her voice. "How does that feel to you?" He took a long breath, let it out in a slow, frayed sigh. "Feels like a story that almost fits," he said. "You ever try to hang a door that's just a hair too small? Looks fine until the wind blows, then it rattles. These last few weeks, all I've heard is rattling." "Because of the Polaroids," she said. His eyes cut toward her, sharp for a moment. "Because of a lot of things," he answered. "But yeah, those damn pictures don't help." He hesitated, then finally met her gaze. "You're right about one thing. Someone turned those shoes. It wasn't my crime scene tech. Wasn't any of the rangers I know. Wasn't me." He swallowed. "But it was somebody with a badge." Her pulse kicked. "You're sure?" she asked. "I may be old," he said, "but I ain't stupid. People like to romanticize this job, make it all gut instinct and cowboy hats. Truth is, it's mostly paperwork and chain of custody. We log who goes where, when, or at least we try. Back then, we weren't as tight as we should have been, but we weren't careless. Those Polaroids didn't come from some neighborhood kid hopping the tape. That angle?" He jabbed a finger toward her memory of the scan. That's inside the inner perimeter. That spot was locked down. Who had access, she pressed. He shook his head. Too many. Deputies, myself, rangers, crime scene guys, a couple of state boys who came down for the day and left. I made a list once, 12 names. He let out a dry chuckle. Most of them are retired. 2 are dead. One's sick enough he barely remembers his own wife, let alone some damn shoes. Did you ever ask them? She said. His jaw flexed. I started to, he admitted. Back when those photos turned up in the early 2000s. Property officer brought them to me, said they'd been misfiled. I looked at them, saw the difference, felt my stomach drop. I told myself I'd track it down, find the source, clean up the record. He stared at the reservoir as if the answer might surface. Then the election happened. Then my wife got sick, then retirement came, and I told myself it was the next guy's problem. The next guy didn't fix it, Claire said. The next guy closed the box and put it on a shelf. And now you've pried it open on camera, he said, a flicker of something like dark amusement crossing his face. You're good at that, prying. He studied her, gaze lingering on the determination in her jaw. You really want the answer? Not the views, not the comments, the answer. She felt the question land heavy. Yes, she said simply. He nodded, as if he believed her. Then you need to talk to 2 people, he said. One's already knocking on your door. She just doesn't know it yet. He meant Ruiz. She'd come around sooner or later. Claire could feel it. And the other? She asked. He hesitated, then said a name she only recognized from the smallest of footnotes. A property officer from the early 2000s. The one who'd logged the Polaroids. The same man whose hands had held those photos in his hallway closet the night before. He lives just outside town now, Randall said. Little house with a pecan tree out front. You'll find him. Question is, will he tell you what you want to hear, or what he can live with? She wrote the name down, letters sharp on the page. As she did, he added, almost as an afterthought, and watch your back. She looked up, startled. He wasn't smiling. We say case closed, people relax, he said. You start peeling it back, some folks might not appreciate the draft. She drove away with the windshield full of blue sky and the steering wheel slick under her grip. The name rattled in her head like loose change. On paper, the man was nothing special, low-level property officer, never promoted, retired after a long, quiet career. No commendations, no reprimands. The sort of person small departments run on. The sort of person everyone assumes is solid because they've been around forever. She found the house easily. A squat, single-story place with sun-faded siding and a pecan tree that dropped leaves and nuts onto a patchy lawn. A pickup sat in the drive, newer than the truck she'd seen at the reservoir, older than hers. Curtains half drawn in the front window. She parked on the street, heart ticking fast, and took a breath. No camera, not yet, just a notebook and a knock. The man opened the door after the second knock, slower than most, like each turn of the deadbolt was a debate. He looked older than he had the night before, in the glow of his laptop. A day older. 30 years older, hard to tell. His eyes flicked to the SUV, to her face, to the notebook in her hand. You took your time, he said, which told her all she needed to know about whether he'd been expecting her. Mr. Landry? She asked, using the name Randall had given her. He nodded once, dry lips pressing together. You want to do this on the porch, he said, or inside where the neighbors won't text the sheriff? Inside is fine, she said. The living room smelled of dust and coffee and the faint, stale trace of old cigarettes, the kind of room where time doesn't move much. A recliner angled toward a TV that was off. A bookshelf against one wall, stacked with binders and yellowing paperbacks. He waved her toward the couch, then sat on the edge of his chair like he might spring up any second, though his joints protested the idea. You worked evidence, she began, for a long time. Whole damn career, he said. Some men chase suspects. I chased boxes, kept them straight. Or tried to, anyway. He rubbed his thumb against his palm. Before your video, nobody cared how straight they were. She opened her notebook but didn't write yet. I'm not trying to trap you, she said. I just want to understand. Those Polaroids, how did they end up in the wrong box? He barked out a humorless laugh. You think I know, he said. If I knew, we wouldn't be having this talk. He leaned back, stared at the ceiling for a moment, then back at her. Property room's like a graveyard. Things get misburied all the time. Different cases boxed together, labels fall off, folders get stuffed where they don't belong. When I did that inventory in 01, I found a dozen mismatches. One of them was that darned box. Thought it was some old narcotics evidence at first. Had a code on it we didn't use anymore. Opened it up, saw Polaroids, thought some idiot dumped their vacation photos in there. Then you looked, she said. Then I looked, he echoed. His gaze went far away, back to the fluorescent-lit property room, back to the moment the shoes appeared in that white square. I saw the canal first. The dust. Took me a second to place it, then I recognized the sneakers. Hard to forget those. His mouth twitched. At first I thought it was a duplicate from the file. Something got misplaced, no big deal, but then his hand mimed flipping a photo. Second one, same spot. Shoes turned around, no evidence markers, no my handwriting, no anybody's handwriting. Did you tell anyone? She asked. He hesitated. His knuckles whitened on the arm of the chair. I told the sheriff, he said at last. Told Randall. Brought the box to him myself. He looked at the photos, said we'd add them to the file, make a note. Said maybe they were taken early before the tech set up the markers. Said maybe we'd misremembered the orientation. He looked at her sharply. You ever misremember something on purpose? She let the question hang. What did you think? She asked. I thought somebody'd been where they shouldn't have been, he said quietly. And I thought somebody didn't want to talk about it. Did you recognize the angle? She pressed. The way the shot was framed. Did it look like your work? Another tech's? He shook his head. Not mine. I always put a marker. Always. Even back then. Habit. I write the case number on the back too. Neither of those had anything. Just the date stamp, August 87. That's it. So who else had a camera? She asked. He closed his eyes, breathing shallow. Back then, he murmured. Half the deputies had personal cameras. Rangers too. Folks like to take their own shots. Keep them for training, for reference. Some for ego. Look what I worked. Wasn't against the rules, not exactly. Should have been. It could have been any of them, she said. He nodded, but it wasn't conviction. It was resignation. Could have, he agreed. But here's the part that keeps me up. His fingers drummed once on the chair, then stilled. Those photos weren't in Carter's official evidence in '87, weren't in the '90s. They showed up in some random box with a code from another case. Another case I checked. That box was supposed to hold records from a burglary that got pled out in '89. Those Polaroids didn't belong anywhere near it, which means somebody at some point took them out of where they were supposed to be and hid them. Who signed out the Carter evidence in the years before you found them? She asked. Now you're asking the right questions, he said, a flicker of grudging respect in his eyes. We kept a log. Can't say it was perfect, but it was something. Sheriff signed it out once, back when the Rangers were still poking at it. Ellis Ward signed once or twice. DA's office pulled it in '93. After that, not much attention until the DNA push. What about you? She asked. He looked almost offended. I'm property. I don't sign out. I track who does. Last name on that log before I found the Polaroids didn't make any sense at the time. He swallowed. Now it does. Whose name? She whispered. He said it. A simple name, common enough to blend into any list, the kind of name you'd skim right past in a report. The kind of name that had been sitting quietly in her notes already, attached to another, smaller detail. A signature on a 1987 supplement, a responder at the canal, a deputy who left the force a few years later and never went back. The hair on her arms rose. She recognized it. She'd read it. She'd almost forgotten it. Why would he pull the file? She asked. Landry spread his hands in a weary, helpless gesture. You tell me, he said. No active leads, no court date, no audit, no reason, just his name, scribbled in the margin with a date. 2 days before I found that mislabeled box. 2 days. Did anyone ever ask him? She said. He snorted. Ask him now, he said, if you can find him. Where is he? She asked. Landry's eyes dropped to his hands. Last I heard, he said, he's about half an hour from here. Runs a little towing business off the highway. Good with engines. Keeps to himself. He looked back up. But back then he was one of the first on scene at the canal. Had tape in his trunk, helped set it up, walked that perimeter about 100 times. Helped set it up, walked that perimeter, had a reason to be near the shoes. Do you think he turned them? She asked. Landry swallowed. I think, he said slowly, that I've spent 20 years trying not to think about that, because if I'm right, it means somebody I worked with, somebody I had beers with, somebody I trusted with kids crossing Main Street, stood at that canal and decided the record didn't need to be complete. Claire closed her notebook. The room seemed smaller now, the air thicker. One last question, she said. Why tell me? Why now? He stared at the turned-off TV screen, at his own faint reflection in the dark glass. Because I watched your video, he said. And for the first time since 001, I saw those shoes and thought maybe the truth doesn't have to stay buried. Sheriff's got bosses. Rangers have bosses. You? He gave a tired half smile. Your boss is the story, and the story isn't finished. Outside, the pecan tree rustled in a breeze she couldn't feel, nuts dropping one by one to the ground. Somewhere beyond that front yard, beyond the quiet street, the highway hummed. Trucks rolled. Tow hooks clanged. In a lot half an hour away, a man with grease on his hands and 36 years of distance between himself and a hot August day might have looked up from an engine, sensing a change in the air without knowing why. The state called the case solved. The town had nodded. Now, whether they were ready or not, the next headline was already writing itself in Claire's mind, in thick white letters over a blurred screenshot of those Polaroids. Texas, 1987 cold case solved. But did a cop help hide the truth? The story wasn't finished, and once a story like this starts moving again, it doesn't stop just because the state stamped a file and called it done. It rolls downhill, gathers speed, collects names and faces, and missed chances like debris in a flood. Claire left Landry's house with his words sitting heavy in her pocket, heavier than her notebook, heavier than her camera gear. A deputy, first on scene, tape in his trunk, signed out the Carter file days before those Polaroids mysteriously surfaced in the wrong box. Now running a towing yard off the highway like any other small-town guy trying to make a living. She didn't drive to him right away. Instead, she pulled into the first empty church parking lot she saw, killed the engine, and just sat with her forehead against the steering wheel, feeling the fabric of the story shift under her feet. This wasn't a distant mystery anymore. It wasn't a faceless system or a dead drifter in a potter's field. It was a man whose name she could say, whose address she could find, whose business had a phone number and a website with a blurry logo of a hook hauling a cartoon car. She could turn it into content. She could flash his face on screen with a red circle around it and 3 question marks in the thumbnail. That's what gets clicks. That's what pushes videos into trending. But this wasn't just a channel anymore. This was a town, a family, people who still went to the diner and the church and the same grocery store with the same creaky carts they'd used when Emily was still alive. People who had to live with the aftermath after the camera crews left again. She raised her head, stared through the windshield at the church sign. Black letters on white plastic spelling out a verse about truth setting you free. She almost laughed. Then she picked up her phone and called someone who knew what it meant when an old name crawled out of an older file. Ranger Ellis Ward answered on the second ring, same as he always did. "Ward," he said, voice clipped, as if 30 years of retirement hadn't dulled the habit. "It's Claire," she said, from dead air. "I know who you are," he replied. "You made me a minor celebrity at the grocery store. 3 people told me I looked taller on television." "If it helps," she said, "everyone does." "That's so," he muttered. "What have you got?" She told him, not all of it, not the raw fear in Landry's eyes or the tremor in his hands, but enough. The misfiled box, the unsigned Polaroids, the evidence log with a name scribbled 2 days before discovery. A deputy, first on scene, now a tow yard owner. There was a silence on the line, the kind that means someone isn't surprised so much as resigned. "I remember him," Ellis said at last. "Quiet kid back then, fresh out of the academy, did his job, didn't complain, married young. Had a baby on the way when the Carter girl disappeared. I always figured he was too busy trying to hold his own life together to go messing with dead girls and crime scenes. But he was there," she said. "He helped set the tape. He had access to the canal, to the shoes. Years later, he pulls the file for no documented reason. Then days after that, those Polaroids surface where they don't belong." "Coincidences happen," Ellis said. "Problem is, in a case like this, you run out of room for more of them. You tell the sheriff yet?" "Not yet," she said, and wanted your read first. "My read is this," he said. "You're about to knock on the door of a man who's either hiding something that's haunted him for 36 years, or who's about to be dragged into the kind of attention he doesn't deserve. Either way, you don't go alone." The word alone snagged in her mind. She looked around the empty parking lot, the church, the quiet street. "You offering backup?" she asked. "I'm offering a ride-along," he replied. "You give me an hour. I'll meet you at the diner. If this is going where I think it is, sheriff's coming too. Nobody gets blindsided, not him, not us." It wasn't the answer that made the most viral sense. It wasn't the path that led straight to a confrontation on camera, to a shaky cell phone clip of a man slamming a door and a creator turning back to her audience with big eyes and bigger implications. But it was the answer that felt right. Real, responsible. And if there was one thing she'd learned covering cold cases, it was this: you can't demand accountability from institutions while behaving like you don't owe any yourself. She agreed, hung up, sat there for another minute staring at the church sign. Truth. Freedom. Easy words when printed in plastic, hard ones when they meant putting real people in the crosshairs of a story. On the other side of town, Sheriff Elena Ruiz put down her own phone and stared at her reflection in the dark screen for a beat, jaw set. She'd just heard the same summary Ellis had. Deputy's name, evidence log, misfiled Polaroids, toe of the shoe peeking out from under the rug she'd been told was swept clean. She could do what was simplest, call the DA, ask for guidance, wait for a political answer wrapped in legal language. Or she could do what her gut told her. Get in the car, go to the diner, look a retired ranger and a YouTube host in the eye, and walk into a towing yard with them instead of behind them. If the case was going to be reopened in the court of public opinion, she needed to be on the front row, not hiding in the hallway. She grabbed her keys. Back at the diner, the midday rush had thinned to a low murmur of voices and clinking silverware. Tourists headed for the highway sat under framed photos of a town that no longer existed, sipping iced tea, oblivious to the tension simmering just outside their line of sight. In a corner booth, under a photograph of the original Dairy Barn neon, Claire waited with a coffee she'd barely touched, notebook open but unused. Ellis slid into the opposite side of the booth without ceremony. He'd aged, sure, but he still carried himself like a man who expected people to answer his questions. The waiter recognized him, brought him black coffee without asking. When the bell above the door jingled again, both of them looked up. Sheriff Ruiz walked in wearing a plain shirt and jeans, badge clipped to her belt instead of pinned on her chest, but the authority was there with or without the medal. She joined them, nodding once at Ellis, once at Claire. "I'm here as me, not as a press conference," she said. "Let's talk before we go knocking on any doors." They went through it again, quickly, quietly, over the quiet clatter of dishes and the hiss of the grill, the evidence log, the file pull, the misfiled box, the Polaroids. Ruiz listened without interrupting, fingers tapping in a rhythmic beat on the table. When they were done, she said only, "Names like his show up in my office's old yearbooks all the time. School talks, civic awards, charity barbecues. People like him are the ones who usually stick around when everyone else moves on." "People like him also have keys," Ellis said. Ruiz's gaze flicked to the window, to the street, to the thin slice of blue sky above the brick buildings. "You understand what happens if we walk into his business and this turns out to be nothing," she said to Claire. "I'll have put my badge behind your questions. Your video will carry my face with it. And if you're wrong, if we're wrong, I'll have helped you hang a man in the public square for mishandled paperwork." "And if we're right?" Claire asked. Ruiz's fingers stilled. "Then we're staring at a 36-year-old failure," she said. "Mine, my predecessors, the systems. We tell people solved and then come back for seconds. They don't forget that. They shouldn't." Ellis leaned forward, eyes steady. "You already know what you're going to do," he told her. "Question is whether you want us there when you do it." She smiled without humor. "You two started this fire," she said. "Might as well come watch the smoke." She drained the last of her coffee, slapped a bill on the table, and stood. "Let's go talk to your towing man." The yard sat just off the highway, a rectangle of gravel and oil spills and twisted metal framed by chain-link fence. Cars and trucks in various stages of ruin lined up like casualties in a war against speed and bad decisions. A small office squatted near the entrance, its windows tinted, its door propped open with a cinder block. A hand-painted sign over the doorway read Hartley's Tow and Recovery in letters that had faded one summer's too many. Hartley, the name from the logbook, the deputy from the canal. They didn't storm in. No sirens, no lights. Ruiz parked on the road, not in the lot. Ellis and Claire followed suit. They walked up the gravel together, three silhouettes in the heat shimmer, the crunch under their feet announcing them before they reached the door. Inside, the air was cooler by a few degrees, courtesy of a window unit that rattled in protest. The office was a collage of a life. Calendars with half-naked women leaning on cars, a bulletin board of toast slips and invoices, a coffee maker that had seen better days. Behind a scarred desk, a man looked up from a parts catalog. He was in his late 50s now, maybe early 60s, hard to tell under the layer of sun and work and years. His hair, once dark in the old yearbook photos, had gone salt and pepper. A tattoo peeked from under the sleeve of his shirt, old ink gone blurry. His eyes flicked from Ruiz's badge to Ellis's posture to Claire's notebook. He chose a neutral greeting. "Can I help y'all with something?" he asked. Ruiz stepped forward, not looming, not pretending this was casual. "Afternoon, Mr. Hartley," she said. "Mind if we sit a minute?" His gaze landed on her badge again, lingered. "I'm paid up on my permits," he said. "Whatever this is, it ain't code enforcement." "It's not about your business," she replied. "It's about your old one." The words hung there. He swallowed once, Adam's apple bobbing. "I don't wear that uniform anymore," he said. "No," Ellis said quietly. "But you wore it when Emily Carter disappeared." Hartley's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. "Y'all bringing her up after all this time," he muttered. "I thought that case was closed." "It is," Ruiz said. "Officially. We're not here to reopen it. We're here to clean up the parts that never made it into the file." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and set it on the desk. The evidence log, email printout, his name circled in red ink. "Why'd you sign out the Carter evidence in 2001? There it was, the question Claire had been building toward. Direct, bare, no theatrics. Hartley's gaze dropped to the paper, to his own signature, younger and surer than his hand felt now. For a heartbeat, his expression was unreadable. Then something like disbelief crossed his face, a small, bitter smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's what this is about," he said. "A signature from 20-something years ago?" "You're the last name on that log before misfiled photos turned up," Ruiz said. "Photos nobody can account for. Photos of the Carter scene with evidence moved." Color rose in his cheeks. "You saying I moved it?" he snapped. "You saying I played games with a dead girl's shoes?" "We're saying we need to know why those photos exist," Ellis said, "and why they weren't where they should have been. You were first on scene at the canal. You'd have seen those shoes. You'd have had the chance." "Chance doesn't mean motive," Hartley shot back, or guilt. Claire hadn't spoken yet. She watched, tape rolling only in her head, memorizing every shift of his jaw, every flare of his nostrils. When she finally did open her mouth, it wasn't to accuse, it was to nudge. "Mr. Hartley," she said, voice softer than she used on camera, less anchor, more human. "Do you remember how they were facing, the shoes, that first day?" He blinked. The question landed differently. Not did you move them, not are you lying, but what do you remember? He stared past them for a moment, out the window at the yard, at the rows of cars he could name by the shape of their dents. When he looked back, the bravado had thinned. "I remember the heat," he said slowly. "I remember the smell of that canal, dry and rotten at the same time. I remember thinking how small those shoes looked out there, like toys somebody dropped." His eyes were far away now, tracking ghosts. They were pointing at the canal, at the drop, toes toward the concrete. I remember that because I almost stepped past them. Had to tell myself, watch your feet. This is evidence now. Doesn't matter if she's already gone. "Toes toward the canal," Ellis repeated. "East." Hartley nodded once. "Yeah, east. Why?" "Because a second photo shows them turned," Ruiz said, "facing west." For the first time, genuine confusion flickered across his face, stark and unguarded. "Turned?" he echoed. "Who the hell would do that?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Ellis said. Silence settled in the office, thick and humming. A tow truck rumbled past outside, unseen but loud. Somewhere behind the desk a clock ticked, relentless. Hartley looked at the paper again, at his name. "I pulled the file in 01, he said slowly. "Yeah, I did. I remember now. Had a rookie on ride-alongs, kept asking about the big cases. He'd heard folks mention the Carter girl, kept pushing. 'What really happened, Sarge?' he'd say, like I had a secret. I told him we'd look at the file sometime. Figured it'd be good training, show him how not every story gets wrapped up like on TV. "And did you?" Ruiz asked. He shook his head. "Got busy. Domestic, DUI, same circus, different clowns. File sat on my desk a couple days. Then Landry came around, told me not to leave boxes out, said he'd locked it back up." His eyes met hers. "You can ask him. He'll tell you the same." "I already did," Claire said. Hartley's attention snapped to her now, finally fully aware of who she was in this room. "You're the internet lady," he said. "The one with the videos." His gaze dropped to her notebook. "You recording this?" "Not today," she said. "Not unless you want me to." He studied her for a moment, trying to decide if he believed her. "You think I turned those shoes because I signed out a box," he said, more to himself than to them. "You think I had something to hide." "What I think," Claire said carefully, "is that someone with access changed that scene, and the record never caught up. The state has its villain, the town has a name to pin on the nightmares, but those pictures, they say somebody else was there, somebody who wanted a different version of the truth." Hartley's jaw worked. He rubbed a hand over his face, fingers catching on a day's worth of stubble. "You know what I wanted back then," he said hoarsely. "I wanted to find a damn body so her mama could bury her. I wanted the calls to stop coming in with crazy tips about UFOs and satanic cults and truckers on CB radios. I wanted one straight line from 'she disappeared' to 'this is how, this is who.' You think I wanted some messed up scrapbook photo of that canal in my personal stash? You think I'd risk my job for that?" "Then help us," Ruiz said, voice low but firm. "Help us fill in the blanks. Who else was near that scene with a camera and permission to be inside the tape? Who made you nervous back then? Whose name was on your lips when you bit it?" He hesitated, just long enough to make it clear there was a name, whether or not he wanted to say it. "I can't prove anything," he said. "Nobody's asking you to convict him," Ellis replied. "We're asking you to remember." Hartley looked between them, sheriff, ranger, outsider with a notebook, and something old and tired sagged in his shoulders. "There was one guy," he said at last. "Not from here, state investigator. Came down for a day, strutted around like he owned the place, then left. Had a Polaroid in his hand the whole time. Took shots of everything. Smiled while he did it. Thought that was weird as hell, but I was young. Figured that's how big city boys worked." "What was his name?" Ruiz asked. Hartley's eyes hardened. "You already know it," he said. "If you've seen the early files, his name's on the supplemental from the first week, signed off on the initial scene report." He swallowed. "And he's a lot higher up the food chain now than I ever was." Claire felt the next headline sharp and cold at the back of her throat like ice water. "State investigator linked to tampered evidence in solved Texas cold case." She didn't say it out loud, not yet. The word solved was starting to sound less like an ending and more like a dare. He didn't say the name, not yet, but the syllables were already hanging in the room like smoke from a match that hadn't been struck. Hartley's eyes had that look of someone standing on the edge of a roof, knowing one more step changes everything. He stared at the evidence log as if he could will his signature to disappear. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dull, like gravel dragged across concrete. "You've seen him on TV," he said. "More than once. Talks real smooth. Likes the phrase, 'no stone unturned.' Back then, he was just a state investigator out of Austin. Now, He let the unfinished thought hang. Now he's management, Ellis said, finishing it for him. Higher than us. Higher than this county. Higher than you. He nodded at Ruiz, and he likes it that way. Ruiz's jaw tightened. She knew the name, too. She'd seen it when she dug through the earliest reports after the DNA hit came in. A signature at the bottom of an initial assessment, a stamped note about scene integrity sufficient, and a line recommending focus on transients and non-local offenders. A little shove in a particular direction, the kind of thing you could miss if you weren't looking for patterns, only paperwork. Hartley leaned back, chair creaking. He walked that canal like he was giving a tour, he said, eyes unfocused. Took pictures of everything, kept telling us to widen our lens, he snorted. Funny, him saying that when all he really wanted was to narrow it. These cases, he told me, are almost always an outsider, some drifter, some stranger. Folks don't like to think it, but it's statistically true. He said it twice. Statistically true. Like if he repeated it enough, it'd make the shoes point the way he wanted. Claire wrote that down, statistically true, as if it were a physical object she could hold later, turn in her fingers, examine under different light. Did he ever go near the evidence once it was boxed? She asked. Hartley shrugged, then winced like the motion hurt. He had access to whatever he wanted, he said. You don't say no to state boys when they show up with clipboards and tempers. He could have walked into that property room in 87 and 88 and 99, hell, any time, and no one would have stopped him. But if you're asking if I saw him do it, no, I didn't. I saw him take pictures and tell us where not to look. Ruiz folded the log back into her pocket, the paper crackling like dry leaves. We're not in the business of taking down careers on maybes, she said. You get that, right? I get that you're 20 years too late to do it the clean way, Hartley said, some old anger leaking through now. You want a neat confession? You should have come when that girl was still on the flyers. Now all you've got is ghosts and bad paperwork. Ellis stood, the chair legs scraping softly on the office floor. We're not here to make you the villain, he told Hartley. We're here because somebody turned those shoes, somebody hid those pictures, and when we said solved, we didn't mean stop asking questions. Hartley looked at him, then at Ruiz, then finally at Claire. You're the one they'll listen to, he said to her. Not them, not me. You put this in a video, folks will eat it up. Corrupt cop, big city cover-up, all the good tags. Just remember something, okay? What? She asked. There are still people in this town who can't hear her name without flinching, he said. You blow this up, you better be damn sure you're not just swapping one incomplete story for another. She nodded slowly. It wasn't permission, it wasn't a threat, it was a condition. Outside, the heat hit them like a wall again. Gravel crunched underfoot as they walked back toward the road. The yard hummed with quiet industry, chains rattling, an impact wrench whining from one of the bays, a radio playing low inside a truck cab. Ordinary sounds, layered over a conversation that didn't feel ordinary at all. At the fence line, Ruiz stopped, hand on the metal. We're done here for today, she said, but this doesn't leave town without me. She looked at Claire, eyes steady. I can't tell you what to publish, not really, but if you're going to drag a state official's name into this, we need more than stories and fingerprints on old logs. I need something that doesn't vanish the second a lawyer says circumstantial. Claire exhaled, the breath hot in her chest. So we find it, she said. Ellis nodded once. Austin, he said. We follow the paper trail, see what else he touched, see if the pattern stops at Hale, or if it keeps going. Austin. The word dropped like a new pin on the map in her mind. The small town had given her its bones. The capital might hold its marrow. They split at the diner again. Ruiz headed back to the station, already mentally drafting the careful, coded emails she'd have to send, internal inquiries that asked everything and admitted nothing. Ellis went home to his stacks of old reports, his notebooks, his ghosts, planning which files he'd dig out of his own closets. Claire returned to the motel, mind buzzing with half-formed sentences and headlines she wasn't ready to write. The motel room looked smaller now, overcrowded with equipment and printed photos and scribbled timelines taped to the wall. The Polaroid scans stared back at her from the laptop screen, alternating in a loop she'd set up absent-mindedly, east, west, like a pendulum, a metronome of wrongness. She sat down on the edge of the bed, balanced the computer on her knees, and finally did what she'd been avoiding all day. She opened the state investigator's name in her notes. There it was, in typed black letters. The man Hartley wouldn't say out loud. The man whose signature she'd seen on that early supplement. The man who now appeared on press conferences about completely different cases, talking about integrity, transparency, justice. She pulled up a recent clip of him, just to see his face. The video loaded, podium, seal, cameras. He spoke about an officer-involved shooting in another county, his voice smooth, his expression grave. We are committed to a thorough and impartial investigation, he said, no stone unturned. The same phrase Hartley remembered from the canal, relocated, polished, repeated. Claire watched his mouth move, listened for any hint, any crack. Nothing. He looked like every other high-ranking lawman who'd made it past the bloody work and into the suits. Calm, confident, practiced. There was no soundtrack telling the audience he was a villain. If she wanted to hang that word near him, she'd have to build her own. She closed the clip, sat there staring at the blank document where part 2 of her Texas series was supposed to go. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then dropped. No names, she whispered to herself. Not yet. She could tell the story without it, for now. Turned shoes, misfiled Polaroids, unanswered questions. A hint of a higher-up whose presence at the scene went beyond what the public had ever been told. She could say a state investigator. She didn't have to say this one, not until the groundwork was solid enough to hold the weight. She crafted the script slowly, voiceover style in her head, stitching the facts into a narrative line that tightened with each sentence. 36 years after Emily Carter vanished, she typed, authorities say the case is solved, but deep in the files, small details point to a different story, one where someone with a badge stood inside the tape, turned the victim's shoes, and quietly reshaped the record. Words like a drumbeat, not too much, never too much. Let the audience lean in, fill the silence with their own dread. By the time she finished the draft, the sky outside had shifted from blistering blue to a dull, pressed tin gray. Storm clouds gathering again, same as they had that week in 1987 when rain washed over the search area and stole away whatever traces the sun had left behind. Lightning flickered on the horizon, far off. Thunder rolled a few seconds later, low and distant, like a warning. She sent a short text to Jason, just a courtesy she'd promised him after their bench conversation, working on the next episode now. More questions than answers. If there's anything you don't want public, tell me now. She didn't expect him to answer right away. He did. I don't want lies, he wrote. Other than that, I want whatever gets us closer to what really happened. She stared at that message for a long time. What really happened? Not what the state said, not what the town needed, not what would get the most views. The real thing, however ugly, however incomplete. Lightning flashed closer now, white veins across a charcoal sky. Rain began to tick against the window, soft at first, then harder, a steady percussion against the glass. She remembered the farmer's description of that first storm after Emily disappeared, how he'd stood at his back door watching the clouds open over the canal, thinking of the shoes, the dust, the way the ground can swallow truth if you let it. In another house, miles away, Hartley sat with his own storm. He'd watched them leave his yard, watched their taillights bleed red onto the highway, watched the dust settle. Now he sat at a kitchen table that had seen a lifetime of meals and mail and bills, holding a beer he wasn't drinking. The old deputy badge lay in front of him, the metal worn smooth where his thumb kept tracing the edge. Statistically true, he muttered to himself, echoing the old investigator's words. Statistically true. He thought about all the times he'd parroted that line to himself when the case kept him staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Outsider, drifter, stranger. Easier to believe the danger came from elsewhere. Easier to believe the monster didn't fish on the same river, drink in the same bars, stand at the same canal with the same badge on his chest. The storm rolled over Dreer's Crossing, washing the streets, bending the trees, drumming against roofs that had heard this story before. Thunder rattled the windows at the Carter house, where Emily's mother sat in a dim living room with the TV on mute, the remote on the arm of her chair, and a framed photo of her daughter on the table beside her. The news had told her, solved. The internet was starting to tell her something else. She didn't know which one to believe. She only knew the empty chair at the dinner table hadn't moved an inch. On the coffee table, Jason's phone buzzed again. Another notification, another thumbnail with the alley and the canal in big white letters spelling out his sister's name. He silenced it. Then he turned the phone face down. For a moment, the quiet was almost worse than the noise. In his own house, Ellis flipped through old case binders by the light of a single lamp, the pages soft from years of handling. He pulled out other files the state investigator had touched back then, other missing girls, other unsolved cases that never got the cold case spotlight because they didn't have a clean DNA bow to tie on top. He circled dates, underlined phrases, drew lines from one report to another. His notepad began to look less like a list and more like a web. At the station, Ruiz sat alone in her office, the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional crackle of the radio, her only company. She drafted an internal memo she didn't send yet. She wrote and rewrote the subject line. Inquiry, historical scene documentation anomalies. She knew how this would look when it hit certain inboxes. Small-town sheriff poking her nose into old mistakes made by people who now sat above her on organizational charts. She also knew what it would look like if she didn't poke at all. And Claire's next video did it for her, in front of millions. She pushed the keyboard away and pulled open a drawer instead. Inside, a thin file labeled simply Carter Emily. Personal notes. Her notes. A handful of pages she'd scribbled before the DNA hit had turned the cold case hot again. On the top sheet, underlined so hard the pen had torn the paper, were 3 words: "Who turned shoes?" No answer wrote itself underneath. The rain went on. Somewhere beyond it in Austin, the city lights would be turning on. Office windows glowing in tall buildings where people like the state investigator worked late and went home and slept just fine. Maybe he'd long since forgotten the canal, the shoes, the small-town sheriff from back then who'd faded into retirement without making too much noise. Maybe his memory had edited the whole thing into a simpler version: outsider, drifter, solved. Or maybe when thunder rolled over the Capitol, he'd feel something twist briefly in his gut and not know why. Back in the motel, Claire hit save on her script and closed the laptop. The Polaroid scan still floated in her mind, turning and turning, east, west, before, after, official, hidden. 2 realities laid over the same patch of dirt like double exposure. "The case is solved," the press conference had said. "The case is solved," the headlines had echoed. But the shoes, those small, silent, stubborn shoes, pointed first toward a canal, then toward something else entirely. Away from the drop, away from the easy story, away from the comfortable idea that the danger had always come from somewhere else. They pointed now toward Austin, and toward a man with the polished voice and a phrase he liked to repeat: "No stone unturned," in a case where some stones had clearly never been touched at all. The rain didn't stop until near dawn. By the time it tapered off, the motel parking lot was a shallow lake reflecting the red vacancy sign in ripples. Claire hadn't slept. She'd been replaying Hartley's words, the same few sentences that cracked the story open wider than she'd planned. State investigator. Took pictures. Told us where not to look. At 6:03 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Sheriff Ruiz. "We've got something. Station at 9. She didn't bother with coffee. Adrenaline had already made its own. The folder nobody was supposed to find. Ruiz met her in the records room, a concrete bunker of shelves and humidity. A single ceiling fan stirred dust that smelled like old toner. Ellis Ward was there too, reading glasses perched low on his nose, a file open in front of him. "Clerk found this while double-checking the 87 microfilm reels," Ruiz said. "Stamped duplicate storage, for state use only. I figured that was odd." Inside the folder was a thin stack of memos, carbon copies on fragile blue paper. Letterhead: Texas Department of Investigations, signature A.R. Crawford, the same name Claire had typed into her search bar the night before. The first memo was dated August 15, 1987, 2 days after Emily Carter vanished. It authorized Crawford to conduct supplemental photographic documentation of local crime scene, Dryers Crossing, in coordination with county law enforcement. The second memo, 3 days later, noted completion of field photography and scene adjustment for comparative analysis. That phrase, scene adjustment, sat on the page like a live wire. Ellis tapped it with a blunt fingertip. "That's bureaucrat for 'we moved something,'" he said. Ruiz looked at Claire. "Now you understand why I didn't want this leaving the building yet." Claire's recorder was in her pocket, but she didn't reach for it. "Do we have proof it was him personally?" Ruiz slid the next page forward, a photocopy of a Polaroid requisition form, handwritten initials, ARC, requested film, Polaroid 600 Type 79, issued 8/17/87, returned 8/19/87. Ellis gave a low whistle. "That's the window," he said. Between the official photos and the first news vans, he was there after the techs packed up before the sheriff's boys broke down the tape. Ruiz closed the folder carefully, as if it might detonate. "He didn't just take pictures," she said. "He cleaned up his own version of the story." The man in Austin. By noon, they were on the highway, Austin bound. Ruiz drove. Ellis rode shotgun. Claire filmed out the window. Blurred trees, open road, windshield wipers beating time against the weight of what they carried. They didn't speak much until the skyline rose ahead, glass and steel cutting into a gray sky. The department's building loomed near the river, a slab of limestone and mirrored windows that reflected the world back at you without showing what was inside. Security stopped them at the desk. Ruiz flashed her badge. "Sheriff Ruiz, Dryers Crossing County," she said. "We're here to see Assistant Director Crawford." The guard made a call, voice low. A moment later, a young staffer in a blue suit appeared, polite smile fixed like armor. "Director's not in this morning," he said. "You can leave a card." Ruiz's tone hardened. "He'll want to make time. It's about a pending review concerning a historic case he supervised." The smile flickered. Another call. A longer wait. Then an invitation to a conference room with 2 bright lights and coffee that smelled burnt. Crawford arrived 10 minutes later. The years had polished him into something expensive. Silver hair, tailored jacket, easy confidence. Only his eyes gave him away. They flicked, assessing, weighing every face in the room. "Sheriff Ruiz," he said smoothly. "Ranger Ward and, Ms. Monroe. I've seen your work." "That's mutual," Claire said evenly. He smiled thinly, sat down, steepled his fingers. "So, to what do I owe this surprise reunion?" Ruiz laid the folder on the table. We're revisiting documentation from the Emily Carter investigation, she said. Some anomalies came to light. Unlogged Polaroids, your signature on photographic requisitions. We wanted clarification. Crawford's expression didn't change. You drove 3 hours for clarification? Ellis leaned forward. Did you alter that scene, Crawford? He asked, voice calm but edged. Did you move evidence before the county techs finished their survey? Crawford chuckled, a soft sound without humor. Alter? Hardly. I supplemented. Standard procedure at the time. You remember how primitive county forensics were in the 80s. My office often assisted smaller departments. Scene adjustment for comparative analysis, Ruiz quoted. That your phrase? He spread his hands. Likely. We used it to describe repositioning items for scale photography. Shoes, weapons, debris, helps with perspective. Claire broke in. Then why weren't those images logged with the others? He looked at her, the way a teacher looks at a student asking something naive. Because not every frame becomes evidence, Ms. Monroe. Some are for internal review, training, quality control. Then why did they disappear for 30 years? He smiled again, tighter this time. If I had to guess, poor archiving. You've seen those old property rooms. Chaos. Ellis set a Polaroid copy on the table, the west-facing one. You remember taking this? Crawford studied it. His face didn't change, but his fingers paused on the edge, barely perceptible. Looks like mine, he said after a moment. Hard to tell after all these years, but yes, the angle seems familiar. And the shoes were turned, Ellis said. You did that? For the shot, Crawford said, almost impatient now. It's called bracketing. You document both orientations to ensure full spatial context. Anyone trained in the field knows this. Ruiz's jaw clenched. Then why not photograph the same rotation markers? Why not note the change? Crawford met her stare without flinching. Because the local sheriff at the time requested we keep it simple. He didn't want conflicting visual data confusing the press. A young girl missing, a small town in panic. He wanted clarity. I provided it. Claire saw Ruiz glance at Ellis, and for a split second, all three of them shared the same thought. He's lying, but he's too good to prove it. May we copy these documents for the record? Ruiz asked. Crawford's smile returned, cool and confident. Of course, he said. Transparency above all. Aftermath in the parking lot. They stepped into sunlight like it was a different planet. Ruiz exhaled hard. He just admitted it and somehow made it sound righteous, she said. Ellis nodded grimly. He's rehearsed that story for 30 years. Claire leaned against the car, eyes on the building's mirrored windows. You think he's lying about the sheriff asking for it? I was there, Ellis said. Randall never asked for a damn thing except results. Crawford told us where to look, what to ignore, and then he left. That's it. Ruiz unlocked the car, but didn't get in. We can't touch him without evidence, she said. We need proof he knew what he was doing changed the record. Intent. Malice. Claire stared at the reflection of the clouds, sliding across the glass facade. What if he left it himself, she murmured. Those Polaroids, what if he meant them to resurface someday? Not as a mistake, but as insurance. Ellis frowned. Insurance against what? Against silence, she said. He builds his career on being the man who closes cases. He needed a secret, something that proved he could bend the truth when it suited him. Ruiz shook her head. That's a hell of a theory. Maybe, Claire said. But people who stage narratives for a living always leave a director's cut. Thunder grumbled again in the distance, echoing across the river. Echoes! That night back in the motel, Claire downloaded the day's footage but didn't hit record. She just stared at the folder on her screen. A.R. Crawford, interview. The waveform of his voice looked clean, confident, symmetrical. She could edit it into a revelation. She could slice his answers into something damning, but that wasn't the point anymore. She opened a new file, began to write the next episode in a whispering rhythm. In 1987, a man walked into a crime scene and turned two shoes. He called it protocol. He called it perspective. The state called it solved. But the truth doesn't move when you tell it to. It waits exactly where you left it. She saved the script, closed the laptop, and turned off the light. Outside, sirens rose and fell along the highway, fading toward the horizon. Somewhere in Austin, behind glass and marble, a man in a tailored suit might have been doing the same, closing his laptop, locking his office, convincing himself that old ghosts stay buried. But in Dreer's Crossing, where the canal still cut a scar through the earth, thunder rolled again, and the sound carried like a reminder, nothing stays solved forever.